in Arizona?
I wouldn't lie about that because I'm obsessed with power generation. It's my new thing. It's my new thing.
I have some thoughts for you on that.
Yay!
Not generation, conservation, which is my old thing.
Hey, Councillor Page, can you hear us?
Love it.
Yeah, I can. Can you hear me?
Yep, all good.
Sorry, my last minute is Councillor Lockenberg comes flying in the door.
Hello, Councillor.
Hello.
Hey.
Last meeting, Leslie was feeling pretty alone over there.
She was lonely.
I moved down to your seat.
Oh my God.
I know. Took my name and everything. Well, I just wanted to see the room from a different perspective. I think every once in a while we maybe should just move around.
No way, I love my spot. I love my spot.
That's why we have to make him move.
This,
You become
this is a
possessive.
demonstration of the different personalities in the room. I'm open for change. And Jesse's
I am like a
established.
concrete post right here.
Those are words that will never come out of my. Yeah.
Those words will haunt you, Jesse.
What was that, Keith?
Well, I do sort of.
Those words will haunt you.
Yeah, you don't have the drawer.
I know, I do miss the drawer.
Oh, you do?
I used to have a drawer.
But I can't get. I like to get closer.
We used to all sit
I know.
up here.
Yep. No, I know. I used to come, Jesse. I don't know if you remember.
Oh.
There I was, back row, making notes, getting frustrated. I can't say anything.
Fort Chicago Energy Partners. Who's that? Malibu Club.
Sorry.
Who's that?
You kept the papers off my desk.
I'm obsessed. Obsessed. Or are they selling it to the grid? I have no idea. I find it so interesting.
There was a number of IPPs that years ago now.
I'm obsessed.
Those would be
Been
those.
clicking on this map all night. Boralex? What's Boralex?
What map? Have you got a
When I
map?
was coming across the bridge
I need a map.
today, I
Send it
saw
to you
up
right now.
at the new build, the
Close?
no, Mount St. Francis.
Yeah.
Oh, it's
Already-
really long.
Coming up. There we are.
Okay. Hopefully I get some charge, otherwise somebody can just lead me in the charge. Are we on? Okay, thank you. Well, happy Easter, everybody. Hopefully spring is here, at least if nothing else, the sand has washed away from the streets. So I'd like to call the meeting of Tuesday, April the 11th to order, and I'll start with the land acknowledgement. We would like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional territory of the Ktunaxa, the Sinixt, and the Sinixt people, and is home to the Métis and many diverse Aboriginal persons. We honor their connection to the land and rivers and respect the importance of the environment to our strength as a community. Are there any late items, councillors? Seeing none, moving on to if we could have adoption of the agenda as circulated. Moved by Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor, opposed, carried. And our workshop today is going to be presented by Gabe, if he would like to come forward. Gabe, I always forget you're the deputy, you're no longer the deputy corporate officer.
That's correct. My title is now the Manager of Human Resources and Regulatory Services.
Wow. Okay.
That's a long business card.
Yeah. I think just tries to capture some of the work I'm doing as a just manager of HR with captures all of it, so that was kind of the thought there.
Regulatory services?
That's correct.
Great.
HR and RS?
HRR, his royal regal majesty. Anyways, so Gabe is here to present to us about the ReDi grants, and three of us around the room, four of us are familiar with this process. Three of you are new to the process. These used to be called SIP grants, And so I know that there's been information sent out to everybody about rating and scoring. The people that have applied, applications, I believe, closed in February. And Gabe is just going to give us a little highlight of what he's looking for, because all of the work that you're going to do is going to go back to Gabe to sort out, to bring to a meeting. I believe we're doing this at the end of April, the final decisions. So the ReDi grant is, she's going to ask me what ReDi stands for, and it's the, there you go,
Resident-directed grants.
directed grants. Took me long to figure out what SIP grants were, and so then they changed the name just to confuse, you know.
Community.
Anyhow, over to you, Gabe.
Thank you, Mayor, and thanks, Council. Really just a quick plug for the ReDi grant process. So I'm really just hoping to just provide a bit of clarity, 5 minutes. I just thought this might help kind of smooth out the whole process. It is, as Mayor Morrison mentioned, it is a name change from CIP, which was Community Initiative Projects, to ReDi. Not all that much else has changed with the program itself, but we as an organization do have a slightly different process this year. So even for our returning counselors, I just wanted to make that plug. So the big change is that tomorrow, April 12th, we have organized an open house. We're hoping that we will have counselors and mayor in attendance. The open house is an opportunity for the community to engage with council and to share some of their values in terms of what type of projects might the community like to see funded. And we know that it's another meeting of council. It is a requirement of the from CBT, so this is a Columbia Basin Trust initiative, and it's carried out by the RDCK through a contract. So we did explore our different options this year. So all of the different areas and municipalities participating in the program are required to have at least one public engagement session. Some of the different areas and municipalities, there is some flexibility in terms of what they do. So some of them invite all the applicants to come do a mini presentation. We felt that was kind of duplicative because we've given you their written applications with all the materials in there. So in the spirit of community engagement, the idea of tomorrow is that it is an open house. It's not a meeting of council. The public has been invited. It was advertised in the paper. The applicants are also aware of the meeting, and I expect that a number of the applicants will turn out as well and use it as an opportunity to connect with the council about their projects. In the past, we used to have each applicant come present, but that did not really feel like community engagement. That felt more like allowing each project proponent to advocate for their project. So that is tomorrow from 5 to 7. It'll be here in council chambers. We'll open it up and make the space a bit bigger, and we'll have some refreshments. And so for anyone that is streaming, it is open. We are trying to have the public come, so please do drop by between 5 and 7 tomorrow. Aside from that, what I will need from council is each of you have received the materials, and one of those attachments in that email is a spreadsheet. And I would like to have that returned to you by April 18th at the very latest. And what you're going to be doing there is you're going to be, there's a line item for each project indicating how much that project is seeking from Nelson and how much that project is seeking in total from the other areas. So again, just for our councilors, oftentimes you might have a project proponent that says, okay, I'm doing this project, but it implicates area E, area F, and the city of Nelson. So then if they're asking for 15 grand, they might ask for 5 grand from each of those areas. So what you need to do is you need to choose how to allocate the money that's available to Nelson amongst those projects. The little curveball here is that there are 2 groups. So we have the general grouping and we have the arts, culture, and heritage grouping. So the arts, culture, and heritage projects are being reviewed by a jury that was assembled by the cultural development officer. That's in line with what council has typically done in the past by setting aside 25% of the funds to go towards those projects. And typically, in the 4 years that I've been here, council will look at the recommendations from the arts, culture, heritage jury and adopt those. But council would also have the flexibility to make modifications to those recommendations as well when we meet on April 25th. For the purposes of April 18th, because you won't have seen what the arts, culture, heritage jury is doing, my recommendation would be that you just focus on allocating the 75% of Nelson's funds And then I will take each individual councilor's and the mayor's spreadsheet, and we have a second document that we've been using for this program. And so then we are able to kind of combine all of council's recommendations, and this shows where there's consensus. So when we come back as a group, we have a special meeting scheduled in the afternoon of April 25th before the committee of the whole meeting, and we'll meet as a group, and I'll be here, but it's really council's opportunity to look at this spreadsheet and identify where there was consensus. That being that, you know, we'll have a grouping where it shows 7 councilors wanted to support this project, and they wanted to support it in this amount. So it provides a starting point. So then you can move from the group of 7 to the group of 6. So wherever there's 6 councilors or mayor that want to support a project, and down the line. Typically, by the time we get down to 4 or 3, we've gone through all the funds, and we've been able to, as a group, identify those projects where there was the most consensus to fund them. So it's typically been a very smooth process, and it takes about 2 hours. So that's why on April 25th, I think you have a calendar invite for about a 2 o'clock meeting. Yeah, so that's my quick plug. I'm happy to answer, you know, if anything doesn't make sense or anyone has a question that they need to answer now, I can also address that. Otherwise, I can leave you to move on to the meeting.
Councillor Woodward has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. So the 18th is the cutoff when you want our decisions.
That's correct.
But you were saying in an email earlier that you would actually prefer it sooner.
If you have the capacity to, it is appreciated, because for me it's just putting it all together in
Yes.
that spreadsheet for the 25th. But the 18th should also be fine. So
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Payne.
I'm just trying to get a feeling for what would be optimal for you when we're gathered here tomorrow night. We're just trying to get a better understanding for our own choices and selections, so then when we sit down to do the spreadsheet, we have more than just what's in the application? Is that?
yeah. So
an
again,
assessment
that's to satisfy this community engagement requirement of the program. And I think the way I've framed it to the community in the advertising and people that have asked me questions about it is that it is a meet and greet. It's an opportunity for the community to mingle with mayor and council. So it's an informal meeting, and my hope is that members of the community will show up and talk about their values as to what kind of projects they might like to see funded. So maybe some members of the community are really wanting to see environmental projects get funded. Or maybe some want to see more funding go to arts and culture. So maybe that's where they'd be able to provide some general guidance as to how do they want council to allocate the funds. I think that's ideally what the purpose of the meeting is. Inevitably, as I mentioned, we're going to see some applicants that come. It is an open meeting, so applicants may be more likely to advocate for their particular project. So just a heads up on that piece.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a new format for us councillors in terms of the way we're doing it. Even when we get to the day that we do it, we have quite a bit of debate usually around, you know, whether or not it's the full amount or half the amount, and it will all become very clear, as Gabe has pointed out in the matrix. Some communities have in the past used sort of dotocracy, so smaller communities where maybe there's only 10 projects that have been applied for, you know, they just post what the project is around the room, and you walk around the room and you kind of go bee health, spay dogs, and you could you'd get 5 dots when you came in, and you could dot the program that you wanted to have as a way of giving some feedback so that the council understood where you wanted to, the direction that you wanted to go. So each community is different, but there is this requirement now as part of Columbia Basin Trust and their engagement, is to make sure that we have the public coming in to discuss what's there. So it'll be our first time, so who knows what we'll see tomorrow night. So any further questions? Then I want to just give thanks to Gabe and just remind everybody, don't forget to do that matrix and get it back. And I'm usually always late, so I will just pitch that trying to get it done before the 18th will make Gabe very happy.
And just one last thing too, you know, any way that you want to get it back to me is fine. I've had counselors in the past send me a picture on their iPhone. I've had people bring me paper documents. I've had people email it to me. If you would like also a printout on the 11 by 17 paper, just let me know and I'll bring one to the open house tomorrow for you.
And I guess the only last thing I would say is that you don't have to spend all the money. I mean, you can, but you don't have to. So when you're doing your allotment, you don't have to keep trying to calculate to have every last cent of it spent. So if there's 4 projects there that really move you, then that's where you should put the majority of your money in. Yeah.
And my understanding is that if money is not spent, it does carry over into next year.
Okay. Councillor Tate, did you have a question?
No,
Okay.
that's how I rest.
Okay.
Thank you, Gabe.
Thank you, Mary.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item 7, the city manager's verbal report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Maybe I'll start with Chris, maybe just a comment on the open house and the project and budget open house and the project that you identified that's going to happen downstairs.
Oh, yeah. So Jeff, first on the open house, thanks to those that attended, and yeah, we had a few people come in person. We do have an email address that was set up so that if anybody has any questions or anything, we'll share that with you. I haven't seen anything come in there yet, but that is available if anybody wants to email us. I think it was budget@nelson.ca that you can send that to.
Is there a deadline?
Well, I think at the next special council meeting, was on the 25th, I believe, is when we would be doing first 3 readings of the 5-year financial plan. So, you know, prior to that would be good to bring it in. Yes, and then it's a bit last minute, but we weren't told about it until last Thursday. Apparently, all of our 30 Service BC locations have been selected to have a little bit of a minor, well, sprucing up, I suppose. So apparently next weekend, a crew is coming in, stopping here at City Hall to replace some carpet tiles downstairs and the public washroom that's down there as well. Spruce that up a little bit. I just wanted everybody to know, in case you're thinking, I don't remember this in the capital plan. That's something that they've allocated in their budget to get done very rapidly. So they're sending a crew around the province, just hitting all these places every weekend to get this done. So again, it's just some of the carpet that's in that main lobby down there and the public washroom that will kind of get a bit of a refresh.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, thanks, Chris. Our thought exchange for strategic priorities. Maybe Sarah, you can share what her plan for taking it on the road, per se. Okay. So anyway, I think Sarah and Ginger have talked, and they're going to reach out, whether it's I think to the seniors group and some other, yeah. So we'll share who she's gonna go out to. Presently, looks like we have 106 folks that have participated, 132 thoughts, and 3,525 ratings of thoughts. So get it out there to your groups and let them know that it's out there and please participate. So I'll reach out to others, the chamber, any other groups that I'm involved. I don't see a lot on the culture side yet, so
I
that.
sent it out to the
Okay.
CDC. The deadline for that?
I don't know if we have a firm deadline. Obviously, we're doing strategic planning on May 17th, so I would say we'd probably want that at least a week before that, so likely, May 10th at the latest. So that's
the groups that the communications is going out to, you will let us know who that is,
Yeah.
so that we don't duplicate our efforts?
Well, feel free to duplicate.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm just out there.
Yeah, no, let people know. If we come out
Perfect.
there, then, yeah, we'll share that. So if you're talking to any of those groups, you can say that we're planning on come to visit them and assisting them through that process. Nelson next, Cecilia has led 2 sessions so far with staff on the implementation plan that came to the last council, just to get staff's feedback on, what was sort of doable, where they felt, the strategies that were brought to council, whether those made sense from a staff point of view. So I think there's one more session here, I believe this week, and then that will come back probably for strategic planning. That we'll be able to share that back with council. We are working with police on their, I guess we're identifying it more broadly as wellness, but there was, under all our collective agreements, if someone is off on WorkSafe, the city, basically we pay 100% of the wages while they're on WorkSafe, and we get the money from WorkSafe, and then there's a difference, there's a shortfall. The higher your wage, the bigger the shortfall. So that is charged to someone's sick leave, and police want to, in the police contract, they have the right to go to the board and appeal whether that should be charged to their sick leave or not. So we're just working on what, both what that looks like, and either it will be some policy, or hopefully we're looking for ways to actually be proactive. So we know all our first responders are exposed to PTSD, and how do we get in front of that? How do we build resiliency up front so that we're not, first of all, we don't have people being injured, whether it's physical or mentally, and second of all, how do we manage that cost? The premium, I think Chris said, for police is over $100,000 a year that we're paying in premium on WorkSafe just because of our claim history. So we're working with them. The West Kootenai homelessness project that Castlegar, Nelson, and Trail all agreed to fund Selkirk College. I think it's a 3-year program. So we had a meeting last week, just an update of where they're at, and they shared some of their early work. They have students this summer that will be able to go out and talk to various people, those with lived experience, those homeless now, the service providers, etc. So, and then there's a symposium coming up in Castlegar. Sorry, I don't have the date, but we can share that. So there was some discussions on what that symposium looks like and what the planning is around that. So that's where that one's at. Nelson Hydro, the reconsideration for our COSA, they've asked us what additional process. So as you know, they had the first round of IRs. They had the first round of IRs and asked what the next round of what further process looks like. We said we should just move to final argument and just have that part of the process, so we don't see another round of additional IRs provides any value and just adds costs. So that's where we're at with that. Vernon Street lighting, just I don't know if I think some people may have noticed that we've had some challenges with the lighting on the, I guess, the 700 and 800 block of, and sometimes even the 600 block. In fact, I think from the 400 block all the way to the 800 block was out one night over the weekend, and apparently the underground feed was damaged during the Nelson Commons project, and so we've had to string this overhead. As you can see, there's some wiring that goes overhead between some of that lighting. With the windstorm and the condition of those street standards, one came down, and that one was removed, and we're doing some more testing of the materials in those light standards, both there and I think the people on council last term remember that we had some failures of the ones on some of the heritage lighting on Baker Street, so we're going to retest all of our street standards again and look at what mitigation we can do. As far as Vernon Street itself, it's, those are end of life, and those street standards do need to replace. We do need to feed them underground, not overhead, and there was some talk in the past of, what do we do to upgrade those boulevards, the center boulevards. You can see the trees are pushing up the concrete in the ones in the 700-800 blocks, and the 2 blocks leading up to that are sort of dirt. There's no landscape in there, so we're going to do the testing, and then we're going to go out to get some quotes from a landscape architect to really look at how do we replace those. So they're not in the capital plan, and they won't be for this year. We feel that we can mitigate them, but we will do the planning this year, and they will need to be on the capital plan going forward. Anderson Creek Timber, we have, they've informed us that they will be doing some logging up Savota, kind of on the Savota road side of the property, to do some clean up some of that area. We have looked at our agreement, and we're just working through that agreement with them and what protection we have. We have confirmed that council doesn't have the right to to not allow them to be on our streets. That's our only interest, of course, is their trucks on our streets. Obviously it's outside of the city boundaries. So this year, I don't, it doesn't sound like it's a lot of logging that they'll be doing this year, and they're just continuing with the work that was done up there, on the crown, in the park side of that, and doing that work.
Councilor Woodward?
Through the chair, is there any concern about the weight of these trucks on our streets?
Yeah, that's what the safekeeping agreement is. So they have to post a bond on our streets. In case there's any damage to our streets, we will inspect the streets before they are on our streets, and we will afterwards. And they have to, if there's any damage, they have to restore that. So that's an interest we have, and something we can. And the other one is obviously the safe hauling through the community. So we're just looking at some options around that as well, whether it's
Just as a supplemental?
Yes, please.
So in terms of, there's the weight, and then there's like engine braking.
Yeah.
Is that like, I would imagine no engine braking in a neighborhood, right?
correct.
Yep.
Right. Okay, so there's like there are these safeguards put in.
Yeah, those will all be in that safekeeping agreement.
Okay. Thank you.
And finally, the airport, as people may have noticed or felt, they are starting construction. The pilings today. I think the crane went up yesterday, and we have found a solution with the airport. So the airport cannot be operating while they have the crane up. So the airport will be open from nautical twilight to 7:30 in the morning. There will be an opening at between 15:30 and 16:30, and they'll finish construction at 20:00, and then the airport will be open again from then to nautical sunset, I guess, or nautical twilight. I think it's called nautical twilight in the evenings as well. So there'll be morning openings, there'll be an afternoon opening, and then they'll be able to be open in the evenings, Monday to Saturday, and then the airport is open on Sundays. So that's where we ended up with it.
Question, Councillor Woodward.
And it's about 5 weeks, they estimate, for pilings.
What they're driving pilings into is, what was the material there? Is that similar to the material that's in the parking lot? The mall parking lot, or
No,
is it different material?
the mall parking lot is, well, I think it had some, it's mostly sawdust.
I say the Eddie Match Factory, if I'm not mistaken, was there.
Yeah, so it was a dump pile for sawdust, so it's true, sawdust, they have to get down to firm ground.
Okay.
Yeah.
That, okay, I was just wondering, because there is quite a patchwork of different materials.
Yeah,
Waterfront.
through the mall, yeah, that was a landfill. So that was all landfill material, so that's different than this site, although I think maybe, I'm not sure the extent of the dump site for sawdust versus the landfill, but the mall parking lot was landfill. That mall was built on a landfill, a closed landfill.
Thank you.
Councillor Lockberg has a question.
Kevin, with respect to Anderson,
Yeah.
when we met with them in the fall, they talked about a cutting plan and that they were
Yeah.
going to consult with us on that plan. And I don't remember anything about the Swoboda Road cut in that. Have you met with them?
I have not met with them. I think it's on their, obviously on their property, and it's just at that end of the site.
Right. But they did say as part of sort of the good neighbor approach to managing that property going forward that they would develop a plan, they would consult with us on that plan.
Yeah.
And for our part, we were going to try to help communicate with the community about what's going on up there. So if it doesn't sound like they're...
Yeah, as far as I understand, this isn't a large part of it. They're still working on that larger plan of what that looks like. This is, I don't know, Sarah, if you have anything for them.
We have seen their first stab at the communications plan and their logging plan, and we're working through that with them right now.
Okay, great.
So, yeah, but it's not a huge, long, drawn-out project at all.
I think the bigger plan is being developed. This is just some immediate work that needs to be done. I'm not sure of the details of that. Right, that's it.
Okay, thank you, City Manager. And Chris, you didn't have any more? Okay. Perfect. And so on to council reports. Any councillors have a report they'd like to give at this junction? Councillor Payne.
Well, Councillor Page and I were in Vancouver last week attending the UBCM Housing Summit. So 2 days started with the initial welcome from Housing Minister Ravi Kolan, thank you, saying the name correctly. The day previous to that, as for some reason I suspected, the provincial government did release their Homes for People plan. If anyone hasn't seen it yet, it's quite interesting. And there were over 500 both representatives of city staff, elected officials, and a variety of other stakeholder groups there, both presenting on panels and just generally participating. It was a great opportunity to hear about a something that everyone's acknowledging. Many, many ministries presented right across the board, acknowledging the crisis, and it felt really, one of the things that I really noticed, and maybe Councillor Page can comment on that, was, as I would imagine as usual, a lot of the focus is on urban areas, but it was brought up many, many times in the question periods about rural areas, and there were specific rural sessions as well. And there was a lot of networking around that. A lot of the rural communities did speak up and raise concerns that rural communities are seeing more than they ever have before in this area and feeling the crunch in a big way. So it was great to be there, lots of connections, lots of information. I didn't ask, does UBCM normally put that stuff up on their website so that other people can take advantage of it? Yeah, there were great programs happening, and it was definitely a worthwhile experience for me to go to. Councillor Page and I managed to work our way around the room really well and sat with a variety of different communities. I did try and focus on more rural communities to find out what they were doing, where they'd been successful, and it was a great time to create those relationships, as I'm sure you all have done at UBCM in the past. So that was my first toe in the water. A lot of the conversations were interesting because it has been pointed out that in as much as the provincial government has a strong plan to move forward, they hadn't over the past couple of years accomplished as much as had been intended, but more resources are being funneled in a big way, recognizing that, you know, we are in crisis situation on this around. So I'd be happy to discuss it in any more detail with anyone who wants to hear more, but it will be up on UBCM if that's the way they do it, and definitely a worthwhile experience. I hope they do something similar in the following year. That was about it.
Can I just ask one question? Did the contaminated sites come up at all? Because that's a huge barrier for development, especially in communities like ours that, you know, are on these brown fields, and it's taking 3+ years to deal with a contaminated site. And
Councillor Page, do you remember that? I do not remember hearing anything about contaminated sites. Sorry, I wish I had
I'll use it as
had that information. I would have made it a question. Sorry.
through the chair.
Yes.
Yeah. I would dovetail that. One of the messages that came out strongly from President Ford on the actions to be taken by local government is she has sent a letter to all communities asking every municipality to identify project sites and inform. I'm assuming the mechanics are in the letter there, but that was some of the homework she sent back. So you certainly could take those sites and send them back through, right, with the intent of trying to understand at the UBCM's level and the provincial level where there's opportunities to be doing building that might have barriers. And so if we're seeing brown sites be the issue or a major issue for us, then let's identify some of those and respond to that letter and say, we have these sites, what do we do about them?
I remember last UBCM, we met with their staff, and they were like, there's 2 of us for the province. And they were begging for more resources, and it's a huge roadblock in their system.
Councillor Woodward.
So is that a letter in our correspondence package? Is that something we're aware of? That
I've not received anything, Councillor Page. I'd assume that it would come to the mayor.
yeah.
I mean, you know, the odd mayor might get it, perhaps. I don't count, but yeah. I mean, it just ended.
Well, no, I think it's something we need to. She said she sent it before, so it seems like maybe it's gone out somewhere, and we should have another look. Or
I will do that. I've seen nothing come from Jen Ford as the president of the UBCM at this junction. Her plate has been pretty full with a number of meetings besides probably attending this housing forum. So And it would probably be coming from Gary McIsaac out of the office, so I'm sure that it's just working through the steps of all of these things and trying to also fit in, coming to all of the regional association meetings, which are flooding her work desk as well, I'm sure. Counselor, I'm just gonna.
Yeah, just no shit. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just gonna let Counselor Woodward, I believe he has a question about this, so, and then if you have a report, I'll come back to you, Counselor Page. So Counselor Woodward?
Thank you, Mayor. So I'm just wondering, in your in your journey through this, you know, what would be the mechanisms that would help a municipality with this issue, or is it just that the government has a tranche of money that they're going to give to organizations? Like, how would we work on these issues in a town like this? Is it through municipalities? Is it through organizations in the municipalities?
If I can respond to that.
Sure, Counselor Payne, and I'm sure probably Counselor Page probably wanted to take a stab at it too, so.
Yep, there were quite a number of mechanisms that were identified, and one of them that, you know, Councillor Page has alluded to is there is a request from BC Housing for communities to identify property. And one of the key focuses for them are complex care sites. So the 24-hour wraparound services to deal with, you know, absolute homelessness and the multiple challenges that many of those individuals face. But yeah, just having projects ready to go, and I think we're going to be talking about one of them later tonight on the agenda, that are just, yeah, and it's a capacity thing, as we all know. How much can a community of our size deal with? So even if tens of millions of dollars were dropped out of the sky tomorrow, what is the capacity both of our social services organizations, our building community, the land bank that we have? So those are questions that we're, you know, here we are, we're coming to do this work, and how do we work together? That hopefully will be a part of a larger conversation as we do move forward. Well, there's one thing I lost as I was going through that, but yeah, so just identifying opportunities.
Okay.
So whatever they may be, and I think the housing committee that we have in place right now is a really great mix of, you know, landlords, tenants, builders, not-for-profits. And the fact that we're in the middle of this assessment of what the housing entity will look like, and I don't mean us per se, but the NAEDP, the Nelson and Area Economic Partners, is bringing that forward with Macola, the presentation that we saw last time. That will definitely, I believe, help us be more productive and efficient around how we collaborate around multiple projects. Yeah, some of the communities that were there, who both I spoke to and were on panels, the resort community of Whistler, is that how they?
Yes.
The resort community of Worcester have been extremely successful and are building on that momentum that they have through
We
this
would all
entity.
be that successful if we had been given all the land and all the millions of dollars that they had
Yeah.
for startup. So
Yeah.
they've done a great job of managing it to make sure that it kept
Yeah, so
moving forward, but
no easy answer is
Yeah.
basically what it is, but just
always a
looking
tough one.
for opportunities.
I'm looking for the other example except for Whistler to come to the table one time, because that example I'm sorry, it's a poor example
It's okay.
to give, because they got the land and they got millions of dollars. We could all do something if we got the land and got millions of dollars. We need to make sure that we try to find some models elsewhere, and I know there are other
There are,
models for
there definitely
smaller
are.
communities. but-
There were lots of models.
It's-
Sorry, I brought up the wrong one, I just find
Yeah,
them.
no, that's just that, it's interesting, because it's, even I bring up that one, Councillor Payne, because it is the classic story of, yeah, it works, but again, it works when somebody else, you know, is ponying up to the table with a number of things. Councillor Page, would you like to add to what Councillor Payne has said in regards to answering Councillor Woodward's question?
No.
So I guess just as a supplemental to all this is, I wonder how this kind of delivery system, I mean, even if a municipality like ours, for example, or other communities our size were given some sort of access to funding, we wouldn't necessarily have the ability or the staffing or the land, or there's a bunch of places that we might not be able to utilize that money. Or is it kind of like, I just wonder, is it BC Housing coming in and saying, we're gonna build here, and it's like,
Someone has to run and operate the project.
right. And if you look at the housing that was built in between 2020 and 2021, or 2022, in this town, it was through social sector organizations, and, you know, we were, you know, part of that process, but it really, you know, we're not running those, we're not building those, we're not developing those. So I'm just wondering how this kind of vision would actually see the light of day beyond just kind of like a vision. Like,
Well,
what
having
are the mechanics of it?
The housing entity would be a big part of that, am I?
Or you need someone to step
You need
up and
somebody to
that
do it.
housing entity.
Yeah. We have, right now, we have a couple of we have a couple of projects that are, to me, in play. I can't remember how we've talked about them publicly, but BC Housing is here talking now about at least 3 projects that I'm aware of. So,
Okay.
And keep in mind, there's a number of conversations going on a number of tables, and I don't know how far this went in your conversations down there, but we always talk about BC Housing, okay, which has a role. It's predominantly been in the social service sector, so building supportive housing. We've had numerous discussions at this table about, you know, these cliches of the missing middle. I keep thinking, like, I would like to miss my middle. But I realize what it's about and whether or not we call it workforce housing or non-market housing. And that's where I keep hearing the discussion for us here in Nelson as being an issue. Now, whether or not BC Housing is contemplating that segment of the housing continuum, I am not sure. I sat on a board of which I can talk at several meetings for the Ministry of Housing. So now remember, we now have a Ministry of Housing. So there's all these factions. So we talk about BC Housing like it's the only thing, but now there's also a Ministry of Housing that are looking at things. And when you talk about, are they gonna come in and say, well, the table I sat at was looking at the regulation and the policy, is it a policy or it's a bylaw that the provincial government passed in regards to housing, is that they are looking at coming into communities and saying, you don't have this, you need to build it, you're gonna make sure that that property becomes available for developers to develop it, and you're gonna expedite the process, right? So there are multiple things at play here when we talk about housing. And so the language, for me, always matters. The entity matters, but it's hard. You get into a general conversation, and sometimes when I'm listening to a conversation, I find like, are we talking about social housing, the missing middle, the market, the non-market? Because there are a number of things at play. And the Ministry of Housing is very new, and it's got some experienced bureaucrats, for lack of a better word to describe them. They're new to that portfolio. Some of them aren't new to government, but they're setting the groundwork for what this ministry is gonna look like. So this is a brand new ministry on top of everything else. So there's a number of things that are happening in Victoria, and it's hard to keep your eye on the prize all the time in terms of going forward, but, so there is that. Can they come and say something? Well, they can. BC Housing could come and say, yes, you need to have supportive, wraparound, low barrier housing, but we could also see the Ministry of Housing coming in to jurisdictions and saying, you need to get that land developed, and it needs to get developed ASAP. And so we are expecting to see you moving on that going forward. So.
Okay. Guess we'll see.
Counselor Payne.
If I can just add one more thing, I will mention another municipality that I felt was highlighted, and that was actually Nelson. Because we, I can't remember if we were mentioned by name one time as being a very attractive destination, which we all know. But the other thing I found, when they started talking about the missing middle, I just had to smile every time thinking about you, making those comments about the missing middle. Because Nelson has, in a very progressive way, made many of the zoning changes around infill houses, laneway houses, all of those things that
That the ministry now wants to do.
that the ministry is now saying to do. So I'm sitting there going,
We did that.
We're there. What's next? So kudos to all who were shepherding that into existence here. Definitely further down the line than many, many other communities, from what I understand. And as a result of that, I'm not sure that we'll have as much focus and pressure from the Ministry of Housing, because those are steps that need to be taken. One of the big things they talked about around development, and this was a panel that it had a couple of large city mayors on it, was just expediting the development process, which sounds like, and I haven't really been involved, Kulos was already going and I watched a little bit about that, but just how some of those development processes take so long that by the time they've got the development ready to go, the market has changed so much, it's no longer economically viable for the developer to build. So it's a bit of a frustrating process for everyone in an environment where we know we want those houses developed, but because of circumstances. So they were talking about some pretty innovative things around that scope of development. But much of the missing middle housing through zoning, gentle densification was the other term that was thrown around a lot, as well as the missing middle. Many of those things have already been implemented, and I feel pretty successfully from walking around my neighborhood here in Nelson. So, way to go, way to go. Way to
I
go,
did
people.
share that with the committee that I was
Yeah.
on in regards to that, because a lot of the discussion was like, it just kind of was like in nod mode, been there, done that. Just like we were one of the first in British Columbia to have the short-term rentals, which was to try to help with, long-term rental options. I mean, we were one of the first communities, even before communities like Tofino, that really feel a much more sort of pinch of trying to get workers in for their tourist season and such. I mean, we were ahead of the curve when we did that 2 councils ago, so.
Yeah, so that was, that was another community that was probably an example for many to look at and follow.
Can I just add, because we hear this around development and the timelines, and I can say our staff and the feedback we get from developers is we have an efficient and effective process, and we work with developers to make sure that, what they're building fits our community. But, I think already on council, you've seen where we've come to amend an OCP, zoning bylaw variances. So, so we're, certainly our development services team is not holding up development. And I've heard, from Lower Mainland, communities that they have thousands of units ready to go. The builder just hasn't come and picked up a building permit, and they hold their rezonings at 3rd stage, so they don't, have people flipping these developments, and so it's complex. It's not as easy. There's a whole bunch of amenities. There's affordable housing, all those tools that local governments have, and that's why the process is a bit complex, because they're trying to negotiate some of those other, whether it's amenities, schools, the, affordable housing, all those things are part of that mix, and it's not complex, but I can tell you here, we've, we have not held up any developments here.
Can I add one more thing?
Sure.
I think this is the last one. One of the interesting things for me when I look around and I hear the comment that, you know, we don't have any land, and I walk through town quite a bit, and I often look at some of the school grounds, which here in our town are pretty vast compared to the average. And that suggestion was also brought up, that maybe the school districts and the Ministry of Education should be working more closely to have a mixed-use environment where some of that land could also, and I know I feel that it's a sensitive subject to talk about. We certainly want that land available as playgrounds and sports fields and all of that thing. But we do also live in an incredibly natural environment that's very accessible. And if there were creative ways, which is what people were talking about, for those organizations to come together, the municipality with the school district, I'd be interested. I know we've been talking about leveling up at the NDCU. There might be some interesting things like that you could look at. You know, when I look at Trafalgar and Hume and South Nelson, there's a significant amount of property there that I think could be creatively looked at as providing a solution.
Sorry, just one last thing. The other thing we should mention is in our case, it's the infrastructure's not there for these, you know, the golf course lands, the east waterfront, the Maglio lands, all those have really expensive infrastructure because they're not serviced now. And if the, you know, the province wants to see those developed, that's the hurdle. That, you know, they funded that infrastructure up front and recovered that cost over time. Some of these developments would go now. Like Nelson is not, even though we feel land poor, you know, we got, you know, probably 700-800 units that could go tomorrow if you could solve the infrastructure problem.
And it felt like the government was feeling pretty creative about some of those things, so I wouldn't be surprised that those conversations may happen.
Councillor Pinero.
I also saw Keith's got his hand up there for
I'm
a
just
while.
gonna go back to, yeah.
It was just a comment / question to either Councillor Payne or Page. Sort of strikes me as one of the problems potentially with being like a leading light provincially, like a town that people bring up as some sort of success story, and having already implemented all these things that they're implementing as the solution. Like if at UBCM they're putting forward solutions that we've already implemented and explored, that's great on one hand, and on the other hand, it's challenging because we haven't solved our homeless problem. So we've done what they are recommending that everybody do, and yet our problem persists. And so, you know, who knows what it would be like if we hadn't done that. It may be worse, but was there anything at that conference that was new in the sense that we haven't done that? Like, where do we go? We've done that. There's still a problem. Where do we go from here? Because we can't, obviously being ahead of the curve is awesome, but it's not working as well as it needs to. So yeah, it's challenging to be put forward as like as a leader in the field when we all know that we all still have issues here. So I'm wondering if there was something else that they were doing that they're suggesting that we're not doing that stood out to either of you as something that's doable or something that we could add to what we're doing already.
Okay. Dan, a comment on that?
Sure, go right ahead.
Just Councilor Pinero, like I think one of the ways, I mean, you can look at like trying to solve the problem, but in some ways I and I'm talking from the experience of my father built social housing for about 20 years in Vancouver, cooperative housing and social housing. And I've had many discussions around this issue of like, well, how can we solve these issues? And through all of that 20 years of his experience, he spoke about you have to get away from the idea of solving the problem and that it will be gone. It's more of a management issue because the problem fluctuates over the years, and you in a town like this, you're always going to have people coming and going, and people diving into poverty and coming out of poverty and struggling to pay rent and then being okay. So it's kind of all over the place, and so I just remember clearly, his statement of like, it's a management problem. It's how well you manage the problem is really the success, rather than trying to say, there's 3 things that are going to solve the problem, and then there won't be a homelessness issue. So I think that's just kind of what I wanted to mention.
So I could rephrase it, because obviously nobody's solving homelessness ever, anywhere. Under this system, homelessness is a byproduct of what we do. So you're right, it's management. However, was there anything that stood out at the conference that, as a management solution, that would manage the issues that we currently have, given that we've done many of the things that they're recommending already?
Councillor Page, you want to take a first shot at that? And you did have your hand up, so I'll let
Yeah,
you a bit.
So I won't talk for too much. I know we want to keep moving on with our council reports. I think what's important for me is the work that we have already highlighted and is being done at the NADP, because I think as we have these conversations in the big picture of things, what is really needed is boots on the ground. And how we organize the entity that will exist within this community and district going forward, that will continue to add to the development units that are being put in the ground, is the most important salient thing we can do. It was really highlighted between the immigration targets and how well they're met. They are. When the federal government says it's bringing in 450,000 people, it does. Many of them end up in BC, a larger proportion of them end up in BC, and when you look at the commitments for housing already being done, and there is a gap of hundreds of thousands of people a year coming to Canada, coming to this province, and not necessarily having the response to build more housing. So one thing that I walked away with is it took us 30, 40 years to dig this hole, and the quote I wrote down was from Frances Bula, who, if anyone is, and I'm hoping I'm not ruining her name, but she's a reporter for the Globe and Mail, reports on city and politics for many years, and she said, people don't recognize that the system is in fact broken. Something that's worked after World War II is no longer working, and people are only just waking up to that. And what happened after World War II was a massive project to build housing for people returning back from the war, and the generation that came before us rode a wave of that success, of that surplus in housing, and it supported the middle for a long time. As that was pulled back through the 90s, through a change in perspectives and a change in how we looked at the problem, we dug ourselves a hole, and now it's our job to dig ourselves out. It's not going to happen in 5 or 10 years, but the problem very likely, just from both Nelson's perspective and the southern interior and the province, will get worse. And our expectations around what is enough are probably always going to be not enough. And so we need to reframe ourselves in terms of what action looks like in this space when it comes to building housing. Just because there is such a gap and it's only tightening. So I think we're there in the sense that we're on the right path. I think we need to form ourselves around an entity whose specific purpose is to fill the gap that the market doesn't fill, and the market doesn't fill all the gaps. And when we do that and we work through our partners, we have opportunities within the region with Columbia Basin Trust, and perhaps other creative financing solutions, perhaps some advocation with the province for lots of money. I think we just need to tackle that problem head on and see what we can do to get to a space where those lands are being developed and we're bringing those units online as quickly as possible. And just know it's not going to get fixed in 5 years. It won't be better 5 years from now. It's going to be better sometime in the mid-30s if we do all the right things. So the system is broken, and we can do a lot around the edges to try and deal with policy pieces. We did send Nicola back with instructions with development services to identify even more of those policy pieces that we could be implementing. But fundamentally, we need more units, and we need to get them in the ground as quickly as possible. And we should not, as much as possible, spend too much time trying to over-optimize which units we'll put in first. As long as there's a project not in the pipeline, that should be our top priorities. What is our next project in the pipeline? And I did want to just go back to ramble too long about the service sector highlight. And I think, again, something that clearly came out of that Nicola report, we talked to the social sector. I know other councillors have talked to the leads of those social sectors. It was not in itself a solution. It helped for a moment, but that put those organizations under tremendous strain, and it took them well outside of their bailiwick when they were doing those projects in a way that we should not continue to expect until we have a nonprofit that's whole purpose is nonprofit and entity. Until we have somebody who's working on non-market housing as its mission, I think it's a little tough sometimes to look to the food cupboard to ask them to build housing, or to look to Nelson Cares and ask them to build housing, or to look to, all other manners. We need someone who can get efficient at this. And we need to make it. So we will. So onward.
So Councillor Page, while you're live, would you like to give a
I'm live. Okay, so since the 28th, we've had a few commission meetings. I'll highlight two major things that I saw. So out of all Recreation Commission, we are implementing a training budget for lifeguard courses so that those will be offered free of charge and without any employee contract commitments, just to try and move a few more people through the seats. That issue is still live, and so we are hoping that, as usually happens as people return back from school, that lifeguards who are in that, have that capacity training and coming back home from university this summer will show up as they have in the past, and that we will have the numbers come summer. But that was one thing I know the community has brought up a number of times is training for those lifeguard courses being offered for free, and that is now going to happen across the regional district recreation facilities. I did have the honor and privilege to support Natalie and the city by going down to the BC Embodied Carbon Awards. I did just make it in terms of how my planning worked, and so I did pop in there. Got to see Natalie win that award, and then provide her notes on the work we had done around the building material stuff, and I was very well received. And everyone was very impressed, of course. And then, other than that, we had a Parks Commission, and nothing really of note for the rest of council coming out of that Parks Commission. And then we talked, the Housing Summit we've talked a lot about tonight, so I'll leave that there.
So my plan is to have Councillor Page, Natalie come perhaps this next COW meeting so that we can do an official presentation here in public about her awards. So yes.
I just want to, it was the city of Nelson that won the award.
Well, works for us, but I mean,
Yeah.
A lot of the work
team.
in there, but it was a
Yeah.
team effort.
Yeah.
So I just don't, want to recognize Natalie's role in it, but it was, it was a team effort by that team. including our
Natalie
development,
Douglas.
our development services team. I know Sam Ellison was quite involved in that, and others. So, and I think Natalie would be the first to say it was, you know, it took a team to, you know, do that work.
Other councillors having any report, anything that anybody would like to add in? Okay, well, given it is a few minutes, I was gonna do this at the beginning at 7 o'clock, but I think I will spend my time acknowledging that next week, it's the off week for us, so I can't do it next week, is that next week, April the 16th to the 22nd, is National Volunteer Week. And we always want to recognize our local volunteers. This year's theme is Volunteering Weaves Us Together. This theme highlights the importance of volunteering to the strength and vibrancy of our community through the interconnected actions we take to support one another. These diverse forms of sharing our time, talent, and energy strengthen the fabric of our community. Through volunteering, one experiences our interconnectedness, making lives more meaningful. Getting involved in various ways, we find friendship, develop trust, and link our relationships. Threading these connections, we come to belong as we contribute towards the same goals. Like each individual thread makes weaving stronger, every volunteer's experience, perspective, and abilities adds to our collective resilience. The City of Council acknowledges volunteer contributions are valued and meaningful. From helping build a home, clean up a park, or coaching a sports team, to cook for an ill friend, checking in on a neighbor, or helping a stranger cross the street, each action we take impacts our community's overall wellness now and for future generations. So during National Volunteer Week, we celebrate our collective impact through our kindness, generosity, and commitment to volunteering. We weave our lives together. So I just want to highlight that I think every one of us around the table here has been a volunteer at some point in our lives and continues to volunteer within our community. And I love this saying, and it always sticks in my mind when we get to Volunteer Week, and that is, volunteers don't get paid, not because they are worthless, but because they are priceless. And I think that's something that we need to keep in mind. Just thinking about this, I thought, you know, there's lots of volunteers. We talk about all the volunteers in sports, all of the coaches and things. Here in the city of Nelson, I did ask Maddie, our assistant, to put some numbers together. And we have, just to run the city, we have about 100 people that volunteer their time, whether it be on the police board, the library board, volunteer firemen, the people that help at the farmers market. We have the equivalent in volunteers that we have almost in staff. We couldn't run the city without those volunteer hours being contributed. We also have lots of volunteers in our arts and culture sector, the docents at the museum. We have the volunteers at the Capitol Theatre, which I know Leslie is one. Kate, you're over there at the rink all the time. Jesse, you've given lots of your time to boxing and the boxing in British Columbia. Rick, you've got the climbing gym, and I know that Jesse, you're always helping. Yes, you get paid for some of your job there, but a lot of your time there at the food cupboard is also volunteer time. And I just, you know, this weekend I got to participate in the Easter egg hunt that was put on by Rotary, and so I haven't even mentioned all the service clubs between the Lions and their stuff. But here's just an example of, because I got a report back from this isn't my Rotary Club, I belong to the Noon Club, but so this Rotary Daybreak put this Easter egg hunt on. And so they had 16 club members show up to help. 18 people volunteered just because they knew it was on. They had 6 LVR Interact students participate, which is a Rotary program to get young people involved in the community. 2 global exchange students, so these are, I believe, a student from Ecuador, and I met the other student, I forget where they were from. They had this, some volunteers from the Nelson City Band came out, and the ukulele ladies were also out. So they had about 54 or 55 volunteers that ran this program for 3 hours on Saturday morning, and 330 children and 425 adults participated in that program. Now, this wouldn't happen if it wasn't for the volunteers. Oh, and I think I left out the Save on Food staff volunteered their time to hand out the chocolate afterwards. So it's just an example of how important volunteerism is in our community. So next week, when you're out, not that you shouldn't thank a volunteer every day, but next week in particular, if you have a group or you are affiliated with a group, you know, do recognize and thank them for their outstanding contributions to really contribute to the fabric of the city of Nelson. So that's my report for today. So, Councillor Payne.
I missed something. Can I have an addendum to my report?
You'd like an addendum? Yes, you may.
The Housing Summit was a big event. I spent a week traveling down and back. But prior to that, when I left the budget meeting consultation here, I went down to the Prestige, where the Chamber of Commerce was handing out their awards. Got there late, but I still got right up to the bar and got a glass of wine as they were reading through, and I'm pretty sure Daryl Davidson wrote the verbiage that he and Tom shared as they listed organization after organization after organization that merited being nominated in a wide variety of categories. It was breathtaking, the depth of creativity, investment, words fail me, but it was just mind-boggling. We only see the surface of the businesses that generally are happening in the city around us, but when you hear these reports and look a little deeper about the individuals and organizations that have come to invest their time, their money, their energy in our community, it was spectacular. I just left there once again feeling incredibly blessed to have found this town with an energy and just get it done attitude in a fun way. Everybody's having fun and they're working hard, and everyone acknowledged it's been a really challenging time recently. But yeah, if you see it, and I'm not going to mention any of the winners because many of them have been in the newspaper, on Facebook, et cetera. In my opinion, anyone who showed up and was nominated that night was just already awarded and rewarded by their efforts and what they brought to our community. So very excited about that. I would highly recommend going next year because it was a lot of fun. I know it was sort of a busy night for us, but I'm glad I made the trek down there.
And talking about volunteering, thank you, Councillor Payne. There's another group, the Chamber of Commerce is, yes, they have an executive director that's paid, but the Chamber of Commerce is also a volunteer organization. Those are business people who have busy lives, who step up to take roles on the Chamber of Commerce board to try as well to make our city a better place. And it's just, there is no sector in this town that does not have volunteers or needs the work of the volunteers that they have to make them the successes that they are. So, Councillor Woodward.
I just, adding on to what you're saying, I have to say, my organization, the Nelson Community Food Center, we have sort of between, it oscillates a bit, between 25 and 30 volunteers that work weekly to enable us to run this program, which feeds somewhere between 350 to 400 people in our town. And it would not happen if it wasn't for volunteers. So, I mean, we are, as an organization, there's 6 staff that do the day-to-day, but we would be dead in the water if it wasn't for volunteers. So I think, I know many organizations are like that actually volunteers are super critical. We couldn't do what we do without them. So it really, I mean, I'm constantly thanking all the volunteers every day I work there because I know that we just couldn't do it. So I really am super grateful for the people that come out every single week and put in their time and pack food and make food and portion, and and help out, so thank you.
Thank you. Anything else, councillors? Okay, so seeing nothing else and checking the time, it's 10 minutes to the hour. So I think perhaps maybe we can get to, there's no item that I can bring forward that's short enough to. So I think what we'll do then is I will ask for a recess and we'll get to dinner a few minutes early. Councillor Lockenberg moves, seconded by Councillor Payne. All those in favor, opposed, and it carries. Thank you very much.
I can get it on my laptop.
Okay.
I just,
Oh, and why is that the way that is right now? That's fine. Can see you. There's Keith. That's fine. I think that all of council, Keith can be the big guy on
Big guy on the
campus.
screen.
man, this agenda's massive.
Gosh, what a crowd. It's all our people.
Yeah, it's our staff.
Got the extra chairs. Yeah.
Are we ready? Okay. So welcome back, everybody. Hope everybody had a nice dinner break and looks like everybody managed to come in through the latest iteration of the rain monsoon atmospheric river that we are experiencing here in Nelson today. Everything is going to be nice and green.
Yes.
So we are on item 10 of the current agenda, and it's a request from the, motion to reconvene. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Panero. All those in favor? Opposed? And that carries. I wonder what would happen if we didn't reconvene and we went through the whole meeting. It would just be
Oh, boy.
error in the universe. So we are on item 10, requests. Number A, the Sinixt Canoe Journey Working Group. A local Sinixt Canoe Journey Nelson Stop Working Group has formed in order to support the Sinixt Upper Columbia Canoe Journey, Salmon Ceremony, and Language Camp, which will take place in June of 2023. The working group is requesting a $3,000 donation that would support coordination and implementation of the event. Last year, in June of 2022, an event was held in Lakeside Park where over 100 Sinixt people gathered and celebrated the 2021 Supreme Court case, which recognized that the Sinixt have inherited rights to hunt on their ancestral lands in Canada. After the event, a 272-kilometer canoe journey launched from Revelstoke and ended with a salmon ceremony at Kettle Falls. Concurrent with these events, a mural by Sinixt artist Rick Genron was unveiled in downtown Nelson, the mural that we have on the PharmaSave building. This year, the Sinixt are again holding an event in Nelson in June that will coincide with the canoe journey and salmon ceremony. Members of the community, including the executive directors of the Capitol Theatre and Nelson District's Art Council, have come together to form a working group to support the event coordinating and planning. The working group is budgeting $27,900 for the event and has requested that the City of Nelson provide financial support in the form of a $3,000 donation. There's more to the report, Council, that you have read, and there is a recommendation. If somebody wants to put it on the table or has another recommendation, Councillor Woodward.
So I'd like to take one word out of here, which is the word not, and just have the council approve the request. And
I'll second that.
Second,
Councillor Page is seconding that?
yeah. Could read then the whole
Do you want me to read
recommendation, please.
the original, or?
No, what you would like to
Okay.
move.
Thank
Your
you.
motion.
So it would be that council approve the request from the Sinixt Canoe Journey Nelson Stop Working Group to provide funding in the amount of $3,000 for the June 2023 Sinixt Upper Columbia Canoe Journey, Salmon Ceremony, and Language Camp.
Okay,
And I would like to also, I'd like to also, I was wondering with Truth and Reconciliation as something that we're weaving into city work, that we would have some kind of budget line item that would cover these kind of Truth and Reconciliation requests in the future. So I don't know if it would be in here or if it would just be a request of staff, but I really feel like these kinds of asks will be coming more often. We should have some way of just officially dealing with that.
right. So as you know, we do not have a grant and aid policy in the city of Nelson. And unlike the regional district where directors have discretionary funds that they can put towards activities, what I would do at this point is let's pass this motion. It's been moved and seconded. And I think that a discussion around budget line item for expenditures, discretionary expenditures, be discussed at strategic planning, because we have set the budget now for the year. So it's something to keep kind of, you know, in your notebook for making sure that it gets to the budget table next year, but also to look at it in terms of strategic planning. So I don't think that we particularly need a motion on that, but let's just pass the motion that we have in front of us. Councillor Page, who seconded the motion, has his hand up to speak to the motion.
Yeah, I agree. I would want to offer a friendly addition and add further that the working group be informed to use the ReDi grant process in the future. I would see this as a one-time thing. I think we have a process in place that can allow for some of this kind of request to go through, and I just don't want to, I want to approve it today, so we're not using, so there's not a bureaucratic barrier there, but I want to, in the motion, inform them that we would redirect them to the ReDi grant process. Sure, we can have a bigger debate about line items around reconciliation work if that's council's desire as well, but on this one, I wanted to add further the working group be informed to use the ReDi grant process in future requests.
We can decide, somebody can move that as an amendment to this, but I still would think that let's pass the current motion. I think the idea here was this working group didn't exist in the previous time that this event took place. And because the fact that events may or may not take place within a structured thing, as you're aware, Councillor Page, is that ReDi grants come and they have a certain time, and I don't know whether or not you know on February the 15th that you're gonna do a working group on anything going forward. So it's a great concept. We do recommend lots of our groups who are looking for more traditional, regular funding to look at ReDi grants, but I think that we are always stymied here at the City of Nelson by the fact that we don't have discretionary money, like I say, like the regional district does. And so I think that it's a discussion that has to be had at another time. I don't know that saying that they should use the ReDi grant is an appropriate thing at this motion, at this time. Councillor Woodward.
Just to add to that context, the ask was from Sydney Black and Stephanie Fisher, who are well versed in how the city functions and where money comes from. So I just feel like these two people are one of the most experienced grouping of people in our town around this issue of truth and reconciliation. So I feel like we should just give them the money and let them do what they do.
Councillor Payne, then Councillor Panero.
This isn't a question so much as a comment, but I've certainly been doing some work in this area, and I recently attended a webinar put on where a group called Women Transforming Cities created a report called the TRC Calls to Action in BC Municipalities, and there is one action that, in my opinion, this fits well within, and it may be a future thing that we discuss at strategic planning, but I feel that it's extremely important for us to emphasize the fact that this is not a one-off, ReDi grant, whatever, but a foundational part of what we do. So if it's one sentence. Take a look at your municipality's annual operating budget and see if their commitments to reconciliation are adequately resourced. And then, if they're not, at our strategic planning, then we make that a line item on our budget, whether it's activities organized by the city through other groups, and we know that arts and culture have been the main providers of truth and reconciliation activities in our community, but it's just a stronger commitment to the work that as a municipality we need to be doing. So I just wanted to add that because it is extremely important, I think, as a community that we recognize and move forward with that work.
Thank you, Councillor Payne. Councillor Panero.
Okay, so I just have a couple maybe questions about it and also some points. I guess my questions are, is it within a municipality's purview generally to donate money to an American business council? This is a foreign business council, which is the CCT. It's not a band council, it's a business council, and it's based in America, and they have a lot of money. They're not poor. They have lots. And that's who we are essentially, I know that it's put forward by a local group as a addendum to what this bigger picture is, but essentially I feel like there's a question there whether that's really our responsibility or not. And the questions around the event itself, I mean, I'm not sure because there's nowhere on that presentation where it says, so this is an actual question, but was any of this opened up to participation or consultation with Sinixt people that actually live here, or is it only open to Americans? I think that's a fair question to ask, given the history. And are we, if this is an ongoing thing, are we then bound as a city to give money to other Indigenous nations that just happen to be where their traditional territory is bisected by international borders? The Tanaha, for example, have the same situation. This sets a precedent in that regard. As far as the truth and reconciliation piece, I know that there's a tendency it feels like we need to do something about this, and I respect that, and I also want to do something about this. However, I want to be careful that our efforts at truth and reconciliation are well thought out, because I don't think they're effective, and in fact they're harmful when they're not. There are people in this community that are Sinixt people and are not getting these sorts of this sort of energy, I suppose, and that, in my opinion, clearly hurts truth and reconciliation in a way that is very homegrown and in our community. And this is a city council. It's not. If we're dealing with truth and reconciliation, I feel like it needs to be in our community, and these people are in our community, and they're potentially being hurt by this. So that's another aside, I guess. The truth and reconciliation isn't just truth and reconciliation. There is details, and I think we need to be cognizant of the details. And also the part about giving $3,000, which isn't much, honestly, in any sort of city budget situation, but it's a token. But we're giving $3,000 to a business council that has millions and that doesn't necessarily need the money. And I don't know why we're doing that when we have so many other things on a local level that clearly need just even a little bit would help. So yeah, there's a strange mixture of questions and comments there. I hope that people can sort through them.
Thank you, Councilor Pinero. Unfortunately, I can't answer the questions that you've asked, and none of the proponents are in the room. I see this going to when I just read the report and the value that's there is that this is a local working group of people that are trying to facilitate this tour as opposed to the donation going to the Confederacy, the Sinixt Confederacy that's in Colville. So yeah, I'm looking at this as a group here in Nelson that are trying to facilitate this meeting, but I can't answer the questions, and I don't know whether or not the corporate officer can make any comments about donations and whether or not there's any restrictions on donations. So
It says Canada and United States in the letter. It says ceremonies hosted by
Yeah.
people from tribes in both Canada and so I think that answers the question.
The letter says it's to go to the Capital Theatre Restoration Society
yeah.
for the coordination and implementation. Like, that's where this will go.
So Councillor Woodward.
So I would just, Councilor Pinero, I don't know if you went to any of the events that happened last summer here. There was, it was quite a large undertaking and a lot of, well, the grouping here, Cindy Black and Stephanie Fisher with a number of other people worked very diligently with the Colville Confederate Tribe. There was workshops, there was celebrations, there was murals. It was extensive, and I would say I know there's contention around this issue, but I would also say that what I witnessed last summer in this town was a lot of goodwill that was generated out of those events. I know what you're saying about groupings that weren't within that, but there was also a lot of good stuff and goodwill built from that. So I would say what's happening here is a continuation of those kind of events. So I know nothing can be perfect, but I do see this as another step in support of truth and reconciliation, and that's why I am supporting the $3,000 to help out in that way. And yes, it might be a bit of a token amount of money, but it's also saying the City of Nelson is and the people that that work with the Colville tribe here are, they're trying their best to do good work. So I'm sorry, I can't answer specifically all the questions you asked, but I just wanted to put that out there as context.
Councillor Payne.
From my perspective, I think one of the important things to note is that this is intended to be an educational opportunity for our community, for the members of our community to come together and have a better understanding of the Indigenous people, whether they are the Sinixt who live here south of the border, the First Nations on either side of us, Métis, and urban Indigenous who make up a very large percentage of many urban populations. So I feel that educational component is, paid over many times by a $3,000 contribution, and they've reached out to other organizations and different areas in the RD for similar contributions, just to bring it all together because of that benefit to not just the Indigenous population, but the population in the entire area, as we learn together and chart that path, which we all know is pretty rocky here. But if we don't start with some of these relationship building and meals together, and one of the things that they are including is an opportunity for many people to go across the lake and see the pictographs, which, again, that's an incredible opportunity to see it with some of the First Nations that have probably have ancestors who created those. So I think that opportunity for the community is significant.
Councillor Pinero?
So I just want to reiterate, I'm not against the event. I think it's fine. But to your point, what happened last summer was great in a lot of ways. There was a lot of good things that happened, and the mural's on the side of my gym, so I've seen it. I saw the gatherings, I saw those things, and I also saw the Indigenous people that live here and the matriarch that lives here and the people that struggle for our community every day, that are invested in this place in a way that that benefits us all, excluded from all of that. And so that tends to, I weigh that against whatever good may come out of it, and I don't negate the good that comes out of it. I just think that when we talk about truth and reconciliation and education, that's the point of this, then why are we not just talking to people that are our neighbors? There's a lot of education that can happen in that regard, and I don't think I'm out of line in saying that those voices are excluded on purpose because they are asking us to do harder things. What I saw last summer was a lot of very happy people, because I feel like it was an opportunity for everybody to kind of wash their hands of the issue and move forward, and that felt great for everybody that's been feeling guilty about it. Like, we've got a mural now, so boom. I don't discount the mural. The mural is great, and the thing was great as well. Everything that went on had its place. I just I saw a bit of, there was people that showed up for that event that I know didn't show up before, and didn't put themselves out there before when the conversation was hard, when it wasn't a celebration, when it was something that needed to be shown up for, when it took some courage and it wasn't just a photo op. And there was people that showed up to that I had never seen before and that have been conspicuously silent on this for years. And so there's elements of that, and I don't think nobody can deny that there's elements of that. Also, there's elements of very positive things in the community and good conversations with the people south of the border, with the CCT, with all those things are real as well. I don't want to negate from them, but again, that $3,000, I think we just need to be careful and I think maybe more proactive in engaging the people that live here that are Indigenous to this land, and that I think this $3,000 sends a message, and I'm not comfortable with that message. And I know that the event will happen anyway because the CCT can afford it to make it happen, so they will, and it will be great. Anyway, probably gone on too long. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Pinero. Seeing no further discussion, we have a motion on the floor. Oh,
Sure. Sorry. One of the things I would bring forward through the chair to Councillor Pinero, having listened to the comment a few times, is some of the reconciliation training that we've been doing at the RDCK and at the Columbia River Treaty table is the importance of understanding a sum of our box. And I appreciate the larger conversations of how we engage with our whole community and everybody in our community. But one thing I do think is important to highlight here is cities and local governments are creatures of the province, which is something you hear tossed around once in a while, but we are derived as things that exist because provinces exist, which exist because the country exists. And so when it comes to the reconciliation component of stuff, and when it comes to the conversations between members of a particular First Nation, where we don't want to tread is in picking. I think this is part of what you're trying to say, is what you are saying is picking winners and losers and all that such thing. In this particular case, the province has recognized a specific body as the representation of this First Nation, and we need to tread incredibly lightly, as I agree, but not so lightly we do nothing in reinforcing those conversations that are happening, and not becoming the arbiters of those conversations. There are no American or Canadian, that colonial adaptation that's separated these people in the first place is not something we should be leaning on now to create additional separation and perpetuate that separation, nor should we see it as our role to bring those people together. It's their role and their conversation to bring together. But what we can do is follow the province, and where it is recognizing groups that we should be engaging with in terms of ones that have established rights and gone through the processes we have been trying to set up to do this work, and it's going to continue to be difficult. But I did want to highlight that we look to the province to see who are the representatives of these nations, and then that's where we go, because their conversations, as nations conversations, are really with the province and with the feds, and we don't want to be picked and put on one side or the other side on those conversations. So I support this, and I support any group that comes through the ReDi process and asks for different kinds of money, and I support going to all the groups in the community and seeing what kind of works they are. But we do have a legal flow of representation for this particular group, and so I think the part of our role is to continue to do that work through that channel. At least that's what is considered best practice at this moment.
Yeah, so I will just amend what I said before and say that if they can come forward and say that they are including the Sinixt that live in our community, because I represent my community, I hope, and people that live here. And so if that becomes clear that they are consulting with those people and including those people in this project, then I think my position would change. But if that's not the case, then
and I think it's important there that would start. Sorry,
Councillor Pinero, please. Sorry, I'm just going to ask you not to be debating with each other. I think that we've heard everybody speak on this topic, so I am going to ask for the question. We've got a motion on the table. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the motion? Those opposed? Do you wish to be recorded, Councillor Pinero?
yes, please.
And it carries. Thank you. Moving on to delegations. We have no delegations tonight, but we are moving on to bylaw, and we have Natalie from Development Services, and Development Services proposing amendments to the zoning bylaw, the official community plan, and the off-street parking and landscape bylaw. Council is now asked to pass the first two readings of the zoning amendment bylaw number 3563, 2023, and of the official community plan amendment bylaw number 3565, 2023, and the first three readings of the off-street parking and landscaping bylaw amendment number 3564, 2023. There's quite a package in your background here. There are a number of recommendations, and Natalie has come to do a brief presentation so that we can all make sure that we have a good understanding of what these general bylaw amendments are going forward. Over to you.
Good evening, council. It's on now. Okay, so good evening. Development Services is bringing forward amendments. Just for councillors who are newish, we do this every year or so. We bring forward amendments. We kind of keep track of anything that we find throughout the year, and we compile them, and then we make a big chunk like you've seen tonight. And so those are usually, errors, amendments to streamline the approval process, and also just generally to align with other council policies. So staff is recommending a number of amendments. So like I said, correcting previous errors in the bylaws, making bylaws easier to read and understand and follow, some minor wording changes. We're proposing the removal of the maximum lot coverage from the C1 core commercial zone to simplify the approval process, and we're also making some amendments to align regulations with council policies and plans. And I think there's a pretty detailed description of the rationale in each of the amendments in there, but at a high level, that's kind of in general what we're doing. One I'll dive into a little bit more is we're proposing a new regulation for the exception to citing regulations in the zoning bylaw. I apologize, kind of technical planning stuff. So just a bit of background on that. So typically our historical land pattern consists of 25 by 120 single plots or single residential lots. I don't know if you can see it that well there, but the house is situated over two single lots, so often people call that a double lot, but technically they're actually two parcels. And this is quite common. You can see there, I believe it's Mill Street. All the houses along Mill Street are actually built over double lots. So let's see if this shows up. Okay. So if a house or a property owner came in to do an addition, a deck, an accessory building, or add a new structure that went over that middle property line, it would actually trigger lot consolidation. Sometimes that is able to be done through an administrative lot consolidation, where basically the property owner goes to their lawyer and their lawyer submits an application on their behalf, so it costs a few $100s. Often too, though, there is properties that aren't, they're oddly shaped, or they've been part of a historical subdivision, or there's something else unique about them, and administrative lot consolidation is not possible, and so they actually need to resurvey the property. So that does delay the project by quite a bit and adds quite a bit of cost. So we're adding a regulation that says where an existing building or structure is sited over one or more property lines, the Director of Development Services may waive the setback requirements for repair, extension, construction, or alteration if the properties are under the same ownership. The minimum setbacks from neighboring properties are not impacted, and in the opinion of the Director of Development Services, the proposal does not negatively impact the future development of the lands. So in most cases, it will be fine. The yellow hatch line was an example of somebody building a front porch. We'd be able to approve that.
Can I ask a question just about that?
Sure.
So, if the lot line isn't dissolved when the house sits on the middle of the lot line in the middle of two 25-foot frontage homes, so it's historically gonna stay so. So if that house burns down, the then that's two 25-foot lots. I see people from development services filing in the back. So that now, it's still gonna be two 25-foot lots. So in fact, you could build two houses on there then.
Yep.
Okay.
And often, obviously these aren't good examples of that, but often people will, if they have mostly a vacant parcel, they'll try and keep development off that vacant parcel for that very reason. Maybe one day they'll redevelop it. Yes, or if the house burns down, then they have two parcels they could build, in theory, two separate houses.
Would they be required to if the zoning said that it needed to be that dense?
No, they don't need to. Yeah, they don't need to, but often land is high value, and so people generally will, but historically, it's been a mix. I think closer to downtown, people have built on the skinny lots, and the further you get uphill, they've taken up more lots. And the other amendment I was going to kind of talk to you about tonight is we're proposing to add care services to the C2 service commercial zone. So as a bit of background on that, all of our other mixed-use zones, except for the C2 zone and a few comprehensive development zones, which are kind of site-specific and really only include one or a few parcels, include care services as a use in those zones. And then we're also proposing to amend the definition of care services, as the definition is currently quite broad. So to add clarity, we're proposing to add supportive housing in this definition. Best practice in planning supports this amendment to add care services to the C2 zone and add supportive housing to the definition of care services. The goal of this amendment is to provide housing and support services to those who need it most in convenient locations that are easily accessible by public transportation or via major roadways. And these amendments are generally in line with the official community plan, which states that the city will champion efforts to increase the supply of supportive housing.
Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just wondering about thresholds for care services. What is that? How do you, where does it kick in that something is a care service?
The definition right now is quite broad, and so usually we work with an applicant to determine what definition it falls under. This definition of care services includes like public hospitals, private hospitals, assisted living units, nursing homes, so it's quite broad already.
So a supplemental, Mayor?
Sure.
Thank you. So it actually is an expandable sort of idea, like you're saying that as evolution happens with different kinds of housing and different kinds of care services, we can actually the broadness is actually a good idea, so that, right, not a very tight definition.
Yes, as soon as you have a very tight definition, as soon as you write it, immediately it won't comply anymore.
Right.
That's what I find too. So it is nice to have a little bit of flexibility.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to move the first resolution.
Okay, thank you.
That do you want me to read it?
Sure.
That the off-street parking and landscape amendment, general amendments, bylaw number 3564, 2023 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Woodward. It's been moved and seconded. Do you have any further things you'd like to say?
No. Sorry.
Nope.
Question.
Okay. Councillor Payne?
I'm not sure, did we pass through the part about the maximum heights for the laneway house and the garage? Is that part of this? I didn't see where it had a break.
Yes, it's just part of the general amendments. And are you talking about specifically, I believe it was in the R2 zone?
Yep.
In the R2 zone, when we did the general amendments, when we added a laneway house, we changed the rules and we made them taller and we allowed you to put a garage underneath. At that time, when we did those amendments, we actually missed the R2 zone. And we noticed it in the last few years, and so we put that as an amendment. So we're proposing to add, right now it allows laneway housing as a use, but it doesn't have a maximum height in there. And so we're proposing to put the maximum height in the R2 zone, and that it would be consistent with all the other maximum heights for the laneway houses in the other zones. And the intent at the time was always to include the maximum height.
Okay, so yeah, I had understood that was the height for the laneway homes, but it's in R1, I guess, that I was looking. So this is R2, got it. And I still am just a little perplexed why laneway houses are 5.8 meters and above garage suites are 6.1 meters. It seems like such an insignificant amount to need two separate heights, but I guess if that's the way you guys want to go, I don't really. It, it's taking up more ink, I guess, whatever. In your neighborhood, when you think about it, are you gonna notice the difference even? So wouldn't it make it easier?
If you have a flat roof, it might make a noticeable difference.
5.8 to 6.1 meters? Maybe.
I think if you don't have a garage underneath, it could give you more flexibility in the type of roof lines that you could have. Whereas I think if you have a garage underneath, you pretty much have to have a flat roof.
Yeah, Councillor Pinero.
I just have maybe a clarification. Down here in the bullets, it says, aligning regulations with council policies and plans by expanding the reduction of surface parking in certain developments. And I guess I'm just, because this isn't my strong point, trying to understand how you expand a lack of something, and if you could use a real word, like a real world sort of example for people like me that don't quite get why or how that works.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Yeah, so
That's a fun one.
basically, the last amendment in your package of amendments, we have a regulation right now. It says if you have a new subdivision and it's approved and you establish a new public road, the number of on-site parking stalls shall be reduced by the number of stalls that are able to be established on the newly created road. So it just says if you build a public road and you have to put in all of this parking, then you can count that street parking towards your on-site parking, and right now it's really limited space that you could actually do it in. And so we expanded it to be for any commercial, institutional, mixed use, like bigger developments essentially, is what that amendment was supposed to be, and I apologize.
That's
for
okay,
how
I'm
it's worded.
not sharp, so thank you.
Good catch, good explanation for everybody to hear, because that is a bit strange when you read
It was very
it.
confusing when we read it, yeah.
Yeah, that's why we have planners that speak planning language.
I apologize. I feel like these are really technical and we're in the.
Yeah, they
weeds of
are,
them.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
You know,
Anybody else have any further questions? Councillor Tate.
I have a question, but I'm not sure which, resolution it goes with.
Oh, I'll just throw it out there now,
Okay.
and then we can probably go through all the resolutions, because I won't wait any more questions.
Okay,
maybe.
sure. So, with regards to the changes to the CD9,
yes.
I'm looking at the picture that you attached, and one of those CD9 plots has a panhandle shape.
Yes.
And then there's also a change here with regards to panhandles, 2.2.4A, which is on page 6. So I'm just wondering how those two things intersect. So if everybody else wants to follow along with what I'm talking about.
I am so trying, Kate.
Yeah, no
Okay.
problem. I'll tell you. So on page 13,
Six.
on page 13, we see where the CD9 properties are zoned. And one of them looks to me like a panhandle shape. It's got the one little dot to show that that's one address.
It is
Okay.
panhandle lot, you are correct. But
Okay.
I'm having a hard time remembering where my panhandle amendment was.
So it's on page 6 at the very top. Add the following word in red. It's 2.2.4A.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, can you tell me how those two things intersect? Because to me, I'm not positive, but that doesn't look like 18 meters. Does that prevent that CD9 from being further subdivided? Teach me, guide me.
I don't know how wide that lot was. If it was subdivided, it was subdivided before me. I kind of,
No, the big panhandle one,
yeah,
the handle itself.
yes.
I don't think it's 18 meters. I work across the street. So does that mean, if it were less than 18 meters, does that mean that big cannot be further subdivided?
I think what they're saying is you shouldn't create a panhandle lot less than 18 meters wide if further subdivision is possible. Because you'd want it to be wide enough that
Fire
you
truck?
could create a proper road and proper access into that, property. And I could check for you, I feel like it's very close to 18 meters, but I could look.
Okay, so, because that's a really big lot, and that's the CD nine.
Yes.
Where with the new CD nine amendments, changes, wording, shift, I'm curious about, so that's the bylaw that has all those bullets about, what you can build on a CD nine?
Yes.
And so it looks to me like sorry to talk it out, this is how I learn. Like the maximum number of dwellings you could put on that lot is 3. A duplex plus a secondary suite, or a duplex plus a laneway house.
So I'll just,
Help me
so
understand.
the history,
Yeah,
that lot is a CD lot because of the specifics around the property owner. It was, I think, zoned R4 at one time, which would allow a lot more development. We had a trespass across the lot, and we knew the property owner wanted to restrict the number of units on that lot. That's why it's restricted to 3 lots. So that's not a general rule, that's specific to that lot because of the property owner.
okay.
And I also think this property could be further subdivided through a strata subdivision likely, but until you ran them through the process and figured out all the details, I couldn't say 100%, but it's likely that it could. That's what I would guess at this point. So.
Okay,
But
that's cool.
They probably could not do a fee simple individual lots if that panhandle is too small.
Okay, and then my last question about how these things intersect is with regards to that same thing where I is short-term rental. So I understand that in the short-term rental regulations, any laneway houses built after June 2018 cannot be short-term rentals.
Yes.
So help me understand what that would mean. So that would mean that whatever is built in the CD9 could only be a short-term rental if it wasn't a laneway house?
Short-term rental permitted use in here?
Yes, permitted use is I, short-term rental.
Okay, so that means that they could have a short-term rental in any of those dwelling units, provided they met the other regulations, and you're correct. The laneway houses would not be short-term rentals. So it would be consistent with how we interpreted the rest, like R1, for example, which is most of the city. Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay, super helpful. Thank you very much.
Okay, we've had resolution number 1 of the recommendations moved and seconded. If there are no further questions at this point, can we see who's in favor? Thank you. And opposed, and that carries.
I'll move the number 2,
I'll second.
Okay, and if you could just
that
read
the
that out.
off-street parking landscape and amendment, general amendments, bylaw number 3564, 2023, be read a third time by title only.
That's been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that, thank you, everybody, for sticking your hand up. That carries. On to recommendation number 3.
I can move that.
Okay, if you wouldn't mind reading it out, Councillor Ockerburn.
That the zoning amendment, general amendments, bylaw number 3563, 2023 be introduced and read at first and second time by title only.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Woodward. Whoa, that's like a kind of, I'm gonna,
I was waiting.
yeah. It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Thank you, Councillor Page, so I can see your hand. That's great. And that is carried. Recommendation number 4. Somebody want to move that? Councillor Pinero, if you wouldn't mind reading it, please.
That the official community plan, general amendments in brackets, bylaw number 3565, 2023 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
I'll second.
That's been seconded by Councillor Woodward. It's been moved and seconded, and seeing that there is no discussion, all those in favor, opposed, and that carries. And number 5, Counselor Tate, I saw your hand go up there.
I can read. Yes, ma'am. That council directs staff to schedule a public hearing for official community plan general amendments bylaw number 3565, 2023, and zoning amendment general amendments bylaw number 3563, 2023.
Thank you. Is there a seconder? Counselor Lockenberg. And all those in favor? Okay, and that's carried. Thank you, everyone, for getting through that. Thank you, Natalie, for coming and clarifying a few of those questions. And thank you, Counselor, for asking some good questions on that. And we will see those all come back again once we've had the public meeting for third and final reading at a future council meeting. We now have Sebastian Arcane has joined us, who's the head of the planning department. I'm sure it's got a fancier name than that. It's planning department and climate, energy. Please say your title.
Development Services and Climate Leadership.
Climate leadership. Thank you so much. And he's coming up to discuss item number B, the rezoning application for 45 Government Road. The application, Gerard Station Developments Company Incorporated, has applied for bylaw amendments to allow for mixed-use development within the existing unfinished building at 45 Government Road. The applicant is seeking the following amendments: the official community plan amendment, bylaw number 3568, mixed-use commercial industrial designation to mixed-use residential, zoning amendment bylaw number 3567 from MU4 waterfront mixed-use and industrial commercial to MU3 Railtown mixed-use residential and commercial plus tourist accommodation use, and off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw 35969 to be included in the Schedule A downtown parking map area. Staff believe the bylaws are appropriate and generally consistent with the OCP. Council is now asked to pass the first two readings of the three bylaws referenced above. So we'll get it's quite a package here that everybody got to read, and we'll have Sebastian give us a summary of the asks here.
Yes, thank you. So that was, I guess you gave a pretty good summary, yeah, essentially this property was rezoned in 2020 from MU4, which is more of a industrial commercial zone, and it was rezoned from MU4 to MU4 to add a specific use, which was cannabis operation. So as you would have seen in your package with the applicant's proposal summary letter, it was explained why they're requesting to change the zone to MU3 zone, which would essentially allow more flexibility. The major difference is on the type of residential it can accommodate. So MU3 can accommodate multi-unit residential, and also has a bit more flexibility in terms of the type of commercial land uses you can have on site. So we are here today. It is a bit uncommon to get to rezone at this point in the construction project, but it is what it is, and that was detailed in the proposal summary. We are of the opinion that the proposal to bring it to an MU3 zone is generally consistent with the Railtown plan and the OCP. Will hopefully lead to this building getting to the finishing line, having a use in the space, and potentially having a mix of residential and commercial. So it does have the potential to really kickstart this Railtown plan as creating a mixed use of residential neighborhoods. A few minutes walk from downtown. So I'll leave it at that for now, and I'm happy to answer any questions. And in addition, the applicant is present, so should there be any specific questions that should be directed to the applicant, I believe he'll be happy to answer any of those questions.
Councillor Woodward.
Mayor, do we need to move this before we ask questions, or can we ask questions?
You know what, it's always good to get at least the first, one of the recommendations on the floor and then
Okay.
speak.
So I'll move number 1.
Okay. That's been
Second.
Councilor Lockwood, if you wouldn't mind reading that, Councilor Woodward.
That the zoning amendment bylaw number 3567/2023 be introduced and read first and second time by title only.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Discussion, councilors. Councilor Woodward, as the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. So my question here is, as I read through this package, and the letter from the proponent, I was somewhat unsure of whether or not this building was heading toward becoming a short-term rental building, or is it gonna add to, long-term rental stock? And I was unsure, and I was a little bit nervous because of the number of changes that have already happened to this building in the process. And so what concerns me is that the applicant is saying we're gonna do this, and if that doesn't work out, then we're gonna do this. And it makes me feel a little bit unsure about the whole situation, because I feel like, yes, we really need rental stock, absolutely. I'm not sure if we need more short-term rental stock.
Yeah, so, yeah, short-term rental versus tourist accommodation, yes, you're right, they are less than 31 days. Ultimately, yes, there is uncertainty in regards to what this project will actually end up being. The idea currently is a mix of residential and commercial, and seeking various opportunities to partner to create affordable residential. I think the applicant's strategy at this point in time is to keep as many doors open as possible. They've been out talking to the community to see, okay, like what would make this project work? What are the different things that we could see? And tourist accommodation is one of those land uses that is not specifically permitted in the MU3 zone. That was the only one that there was a slight possibility that there could be an option for this building to be partially devoted to tourist accommodation or fully devoted to it. We don't know for sure. The applicant doesn't know for sure, but that's not where they're going at this point in time. Ultimately, it's flexibility is key. As long as the flexibility in the land uses are generally consistent with the area. And ultimately is trying to get this project completed is really strongest rationale.
Thank you.
So, if I may, just before Councilor Lockenberg, I hear that question, and then, so one of the things would be is because adding tourist accommodation would be only earmarked in the MU3 for this particular site, that is something that council could change that zoning from MU4 to MU3 and not have in the little extra 3 words.
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Lockenberg.
I was just going to briefly say that we're not losing housing by going to short-term rental. It was not going to be housing in the first place. So to me, this seems like a fairly straightforward approval to do this rezone.
I have Councilor Page, then Kate, then Pinero.
I would also reiterate that from the city's perspective, or at least my perspective, the city's perspective, getting the built forms moving in Railtown and getting those uses up and running is the important thing. Here, if we want to revisit some of the short-term rental stuff, I think that's also an important conversation to have. But in the context of this project and what they're doing and how they're building and what it's going to contribute to that area in terms of kickstarting and furthering momentum and building up Railtown and getting it to be the vibrant neighborhood we envision, I think the flexibility on use really does align. I see the connection within the report and within the aspirations for this to have this be a live work situation, and you know, it takes a couple tries, as anyone in business knows, sometimes to find just the right market fit, and getting this building up, done, finished, and occupied with someone I think is what needs to happen here. And so if we can support that by aligning some of these documents to the larger principles outlaid in our planning and our OCP, then I think it's a good fit for sure. Which is a little redundant to what else has been said, but that's my piece on it.
Councillor Tate.
Hi, thank you. Am I misunderstanding? I think MU3 already allows short-term rental.
So yeah, so short-term rentals and tourist accommodations are two different terms that we use. Short-term rental has more rules, I guess, and those are the typical Airbnbs that we would see in more residential neighborhood. So someone could have a property on Baker and operate short-term rentals, but they fall under the tourist designation. So
They're also C1. They're like a different
Yeah,
zone.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, correct. It's just an example that they fall under different rules. So if we didn't add tourist accommodation in this zone, short-term rentals would be still permitted, but they are limited.
They would only be allowed 3
Correct, yes.
in the building.
Yeah.
So you would be allowed 3 in the building unless there's other ones on that block already with the MU3 without the plus tourist accommodation.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Pinero.
Yeah, I may not be understanding completely, but I think everybody's in agreement that we obviously need more housing. I also feel like there's a fairly broad consensus that we don't need more short-term housing, and so if there's already three of these units that are permitted in the current zoning, how much more flexibility do they need unless they're just planning on making the whole thing tourist housing? In which case I understand that it's not taking away housing that currently exists, but it does feel like a missed opportunity to add something. So I like all of this except for this one paragraph, and I wonder if we could, if we're really hamstringing this project by just telling them that they can have their 3 if they need it, and leaving it at that. I don't know, but
Yeah, it is a discussion that we've been having with the applicant about how important that is, and I think the idea came from some conversations with various operators that operate in Nelson that sometimes would need that type of, I'll buy 10 units for my guests that come in for a week. So it was seen as one opportunity. And again, it's just building flexibility. So if council feels strongly opposed to it, I think the applicant would be okay with that being removed and moving forward with the MU3 zone without that specific clause. But at the end of the day, flexibility and the building is there. So we hate to come back in 6 months and say, oh, by the way, in order to make this building complete, this is the use we have for tourist accommodation. So, I don't know that it'd be really hurtful to keep it in to get this project over the finish line.
This recommendation number 1 has been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion on number 1?
So I think just if someone, you'd have to propose an amendment
You have
to
to
the current.
to this. If you wanted to take out,
yeah,
And somebody would have to second it. And
can I propose that then?
you would like to make an amendment to
remove.
remove tourist accommodation?
Yes, please.
Okay, so there's a mover for an amendment to remove from the MU3 zone the addition of tourist accommodation use.
I'll second that.
And that's been seconded, so that's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the amendment. Councillor Tate.
we can save this for another time, but I know that we have had housing needs studies in the city, and I'm interested in what you said about other businesses saying that this could be really useful to them. So at some point in the future, I would love to tap into the NAEDP or maybe the chamber and just ask, is there a need? Like, what are we looking at for need in terms of tourist accommodation in the city? Because I know we've been really digging into some of the other types of needs, and this would be interesting to me because I've also heard it about tournaments and those sorts of things. So it'd be interesting to know if there's a way to flesh out a bit more data on that. Please. I don't know how to do that. You'll teach me later.
Okay, any further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, voting on the amendment, which is to strike the words tourist accommodation use from the zoning amendment,
Mayor,
which is item number 1.
Sorry, Mayor, may I
Sure.
comment? Just for, quickly, I'm gonna speak against the amendment, in part because I understand how difficult it is in this climate to get a project over the finish line. I know the proponent's working really hard to do the right thing over and over again, and I think that in the end, if we do strike that designation and it makes the project more difficult to get financed or whatever, it's which I can totally see happening. Sometimes financing hinges on just the simple flexibility that at some point in the future, this project, if this fails, then you've got this backup. And I know financiers, funders, banks will consider that. And so I do think it may seem like a small thing now, but it does potentially put the project at risk. So I'd propose we not approve the amendment.
Councillor Payne.
I will speak for the amendment. I think there's a very clear need for affordable rental housing in our town that's been demonstrated by the housing needs assessment. And until I see information proving that there is a strong need for more tourist accommodation, which I don't doubt, but I have not seen that, I would really like to keep my eyes on the prize of adding to our affordable rental stock. I do have some trepidation around what could happen as far as the rest of the units go, and I fully support getting this project over the finish line. I think it's critically important to the success of Railtown. Maybe I am mistaken, but if this is a barrier to getting financing to finish this project, then I would have to think there would be other ways. The project looks awesome. I think there are partners out there looking for exactly this type of thing. They've added a lot of great features in there, but I am solidly focused on adding affordable rental unit spaces to our town.
Well, everybody likes to hear from the mayor periodically, so I guess I'll weigh in on this a little bit. I'm perfectly fine with the zoning request as put in, including the tourist operation. And just reflecting back on something that Councillor Lockenberg said quite quietly early on when I gave him the floor, and that is there was no residential accommodation in this building when this was first brought to the development team, and so I think that giving them flexibility, I actually believe that this will turn into a unit that has residential capabilities. I see the CEO of the executive director of the Chamber of Commerce sitting here, and I see this site as a perfect site to look at this missing middle housing that we talked about earlier on today in the earlier part of the meeting, and I do see it becoming housing, and I don't see that having this in there. And there is some. I see a lot of opportunities here, so I think that the amendment. I don't think the amendment is necessary. We're kind of cobbling a horse that wasn't there to start with. So this is great that the proponent has come and actually asked for a zoning change that would allow for housing or some kind of residential use, and I think that we should support him because we do have a number of issues around supporting here, around housing here in the city of Nelson, so. Councillor Tate, did I see you?
That's
Okay,
just
sorry.
my thinking fingers.
It's okay. I just don't want to miss you, because sometimes that doesn't move too far, and that means that you wanted to talk. Councillor Page, I did see your hand up.
I'm obvious.
It's very similar. We're taking action on a broader scope in terms of the work we've sent Nicola away with to come back with policy pieces. Those affordable housing pieces, everybody knows I'm a strong proponent for them, and I want to see us do more everywhere. I do not want to put a specific project in motion, struggling to get over the line at the tip of that spear, when we have to have that conversation in a larger sense about the whole city, all the zoning, and how that plays out, what our short-term rental rules look like. Do we like them? Do we need to pull them back? What are those policy pieces for the entire city or the entire region? I think when we put that at the tip of the spear on this one project, it isn't really fair to the proponent, and I want to make sure that we give them the flexibility they think they need to give them every opportunity to get this finished, and also have those conversations in their fullness at a later time, so that we are progressing ourselves to a situation that's not as exposed to the housing crisis that will continue to worsen over the next decade.
Okay, seeing no further discussion, we have an amendment on the floor, and the amendment is to strike tourist accommodation use from the zoning amendment 3567. On the amendment, all those in favor of the amendment? And all those opposed? And the opposition carries. So back to the original recommendation, resolution, and that is that the zoning amendment bylaw number 3567, 2023 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only. It was moved and seconded. Any further discussion on the original motion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Sorry, I got muddled. Did you read the second one already?
No, I'm on number one, because we still have to pass the original, so
Okay,
I'm
sorry, good.
asking
I'm with
for.
you.
Yeah, so we're back to number one. So it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of resolution number one? 1, 2, 3. And those opposed? And that also carries. And number two, Councillor Lockenberg, if you don't mind.
The official community plan amendment bylaw number 3568, 2023 be introduced and read for the second time by title only.
That's been moved. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Page. Sorry, Councillor Woodward. Any discussion? This will, of course, as we know, have to go to a public hearing. So this is first and second reading. This is not final reading. No discussion. All those in favor and those opposed, and that carries. Item number 3.
I'll move it.
Moved by Councillor Woodward. Is there a seconder? Councillor Lockenberg is seconded. Somebody read it, please.
That the off-street parking and landscape amendment bylaw number 3562, 2023 be introduced and read for the first and second time by title only.
And any discussion? Councillor Tate.
I'm really obvious when I put my hand up.
Oh, good. That's good. I got that one that time. Thanks.
Do I understand that the reason that we can't go underground is because it's brownfield? Is that correct? Because there's a bunch of environmental stuff in here.
Yeah, there's a lot of different reasons for it. That could be one.
Okay.
It's extremely costly, and the water's not too far down there, so, yeah.
Other questions, councillors? Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Resolution number 3. All those in favor? Those opposed? And that carries. Thank you. Item number 4, resolution. Is there a mover?
I'll move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward. Is there a seconder? Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
That a voluntary affordable housing contribution to the City of Affordable Housing Fund be explored at the time of development permit for 45 Government Road based on final land use composition, rental tenure, and funding mechanism.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Are there any questions? Councillor Payne.
My understanding was that we discussed this with anyone bringing a development forward, so I'm not sure why we need to have it as a resolution. Am I mistaken in that?
No, I think this one's a bit different in the sense that you don't quite know what it's going to end up being. So it makes that covenant or whatever that number is tricky to determine at rezoning stage. Way easier to determine at development stage. And, really we use the policy to guide that conversation, but we don't have it at this stage.
So
So I
sorry,
think
that's what I
that's-
mean.
yeah, I
I'm trying to
think that's
understand.
the
It's
only
at
change.
development stage. I thought that was determined.
It wouldn't normally, as the director said, it would be normally done at the zoning stage.
Okay.
The only change you're saying is do this at the development permit stage instead, to give us that opportunity to understand what this project will be.
Okay. I didn't understand that distinction.
Any further questions? Okay, that's been,
So this is the part that also talks about, no, that's the voluntary contribution to the city's affordable housing fund. Oh, can be explored. Okay. I always find that a very interesting policy that we have, the voluntary contribution by the developer for future reference.
That's legislation.
I
We
know.
can't require
I
that.
still find it really interesting.
okay. Resolution number 4 has been moved and seconded. All those in favor? And that's carried. Item number 5.
I'll move
Councillor Tate, seconded by Councillor Payne. Councillor Tate, please.
that staff be directed to schedule a public hearing with regard to official community plan amendment bylaw number 3568, 2023, and zoning amendment bylaw number 3567, 2023.
Okay, any discussion on that? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Okay, and those opposed, and that carries. Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh,
Can I-
whoa, we got a question by Councillor Tate.
I don't know if I'm allowed to ask a question in the middle of a business meeting, but I'm going to try anyway. Is there anything like the uphill market, and they started off with 3 apartments, and then they applied for stratification?
Yeah.
And that's the normal order of operations? Or sometimes you would do that first?
Yeah.
Okay.
Typically when it's a new building, you do it first, because you don't have to ask council permission. But if somebody's already lived in it, then it needs to go through council permission, so there's no guarantee.
So helpful, thank you. Thanks.
Okay. And going on to item C. And I'm wondering if there's a staff person that's gonna come up and, oh, look at that.
whole
We
team.
have Emily and we have Carmen. Okay, as they're coming up, I'm just gonna read the analysis here. It's consistent with the Nelson Next and previous council direction implementing an organics diversion program that makes use of countertop appliances to pre-treat household organics. Staff are currently preparing to pilot the program amongst 1,600 households made up of the Fairview neighborhood and also those signed up as early adopters across the city. In order to ensure that the program can be properly administered and regulated by the city, a bylaw amendment is required. Council is now requested to pass first 3 readings of Waste Management and Wildlife Attractant Amendment Bylaw number 3566, 2023. So I will turn it over to Carmen and to Emily.
Okay, so we explored various avenues to ensure some accountability for the pretreatment appliances for when we put them into our residents' homes. So we created this bylaw as our best solution to some of these issues that we're going to be dealing with. So the bylaw that we've proposed does several things. It ensures that all residents know that the appliance remains the property of the city of Nelson. It ensures that the appliance is kept in, that there's accountability of our residents to keep it in good working order and to use it as directed in our education material. It also keeps the appliance within the city, and so that it doesn't move with the resident upon turnovers outside of our city. It notifies that residents that they are responsible for the electricity costs that are associated with the usage. It also puts us in a bit of a position to verify if a appliance is not working well. There is a process that will be set up for residents to tell us about any misoperations so that we can deal with that and repair with that. And then it also gives us the ability to relocate the appliance if needed, and to if a resident was to move, they are responsible for notifying us about their turnover. And then there are some regulatory powers in our hands if that resident wasn't to do so, and to return the appliance as directed if the city so wishes. Basically, yeah, there's other aspects of this of the bylaw that just give us basically it's going to work with our residents as like our kind of terms within the bylaw. So
No, I think you're doing great. Yeah, basically the objective of this would be, we don't want the units to leave the city of Nelson, and so we needed to come up with a way of when we disperse the unit the first original time, that it stays with the property, and that if it doesn't, that a fee would be imposed, and then the city could collect and in the means that it's available to them at that time. And that goes for misuse, obvious misuse, obviously. There's gonna be maintenance, and that's okay. Yeah, it's basically just, we wanted to, have a bit more support when we're rolling out this program, so that we have, we've protected the city against the units leaving when people move.
Questions, Councillor Pinero?
So just in the worst case scenario, potentially, I'm trying to imagine this, but somebody does leave town with their food cycler, what could we do about that? If, move to Norway tomorrow and take it with us? What recourse do you sort of see as sort of tracking that asset down and or preventing that from happening in the first place? And also with the misuse, I don't want to give people ideas, but what would you misuse it for? and then how would we know that that's happening? Is that just if they bring it in broken and it's clearly been misused? Is that what you meant by that?
yeah, I think with the misuse and the repairs, you're going to lean on the manufacturer quite a bit to see what are some of the situations they've dealt with in the past, because they have been operating in business for almost 10 years now. So they would be able to tell us what that looks like. I mean, I think some of the, if there was misuse, I think it would be pretty obvious. It would be direct, like water damage, or you're gonna cycle of rocks or something through it. I think it would be fairly discretionary and pretty easy to tell. They have it our troubleshooting kind of thing that we'll be going through. And then it depends on if the resident was to leave the community without the appliance and notify us about it is one thing, and to not notify us is another. If they were to notify us that they're leaving the community, we would just tell them that they are going to be accountable for the fee that is associated with the appliance, a replacement fee for the address that it's assigned to, and that would be our typical collections.
It would be invoiced. and if they didn't pay the invoice, then that would be a fee that was uncollected, and the city has fees and bylaws that would handle that at that point.
I just have a clarification.
Sure.
Just, are we giving these to homeowners who live in their home? So there's not rental, like there's not renters that, I don't own a home that has a food cycler and then the renters take off and then I'm on the hook for that food cycler. Is that a possible situation?
We're trying to make it so that so it's as accessible as possible, so that when landlords feel comfortable with their renters having a food cycler, that the accountability would be held by the tenant. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
They won't,
And
the
this is-
landlords will not be on the hook.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. So when you purchase a home, usually, like say you go look at a home and there's a kitchen, there's your fridge, your dishwasher, all these items. Usually in the agreement of purchase, those items are either in or out, right? Like the seller can take their fridge, but that has to be included in your agreement. So I'm just wondering, like, when a house turns over, this food cycle would have to stay with the house, and so how are we working with that? Like, that would have to be in the agreement when the house is purchased, right? The cycler is part of the.
I can
The
clarify that.
cycle containers and the garbage containers, they stay with the
They
property.
stay with the property.
They stay.
So they, unlike your dishwasher, the food cycler is not the property of the owner.
Right, it's
It's the
property of the
property
city.
of the city, right? So that owner has a agreement with us that they must leave the food cycler with the property, right?
Right. So would that be, that would not be included in the
No.
purchase agreement?
No, because
Okay.
they don't own that
They don't, right.
chattel, right?
Okay, just wanted clarification on that, thank you.
But then, sorry, if the owner has an agreement with us and their tenants take off with food cycler,
We're not talking tenants, we're talking owners. So I sell my house and
is there
it has to stay with the new
Is there
owner.
no situation here where tenants have access to a food cycler?
They do.
They do. So, I think that's
Yeah,
where
we have
we're
to-
getting caught up.
It's
Yeah.
attached to the address, I thought I read. Does that help? It's attached to an address, not to a,
Tenant.
not to a tenant or an owner, it's attached to an address.
Can I speak just in general on collections and accounts receivable? So the City of Nelson has a few different avenues we can use when there are amounts owing to us. Of course, the first that the team suggested there was you can invoice. We also have a collections agency that can go out and, locate folks, and, they have tools as well as far as what they can do with people's credit ratings and that kind of thing. The situation would be different if it's a tenant or if it's a homeowner, but we do have the ability in general terms to put things on property taxes as well. So there's a whole suite of tools, and which one would we use, and it depends on the situation, but there are things we could do. But I don't think we'd be looking to transfer a debt owed by a tenant to a property owner.
And I think in the initial rollout, we're gonna be cautious around tenants, and in the first instance, we're gonna mostly place these with property owners and make sure that's all working before we go on to the sort of the tenant side of it, because it is a bit more complicated with a tenant than a property owner.
We did present to the Landlords Association. Of course, that doesn't represent every landlord in the city, but there was a good amount of people in attendance that evening, and one of the landlords even suggested that they put it into their own leases. They were very supportive of the program, and one of the ideas was like in the switchover, they wouldn't mind being responsible for teaching the new tenant, like, this is what you use and this is how to use it, this is where the website where you get more information, And they even thought of like putting it right into their own lease. Of course, that's not something that we would require, but when a tenant wanted a food cycler, we were presenting to the landlord association so that we could sort of gauge like how much did you want to be involved? Did you want to have, like, we obviously don't want to have a situation where these are not accessible to everybody. And so we wouldn't want the landlord to be, if they were not in agreement to it, to have that power and then their tenant wasn't able to use it. But of course, if their tenant doesn't want to use it, then we also talked about, you know, how would that safely get returned to the city. So there's quite a few layers of logistics with all of this, and trust us, we've thought of absolutely almost everything that we possibly can, but it is a pilot, and as it rolls out, we're going to be designing the final stages, of course, as we're approaching them, we're going to be designing in mind to be flexible, to be able to change and address things if things are not working as smoothly as we anticipate.
I move the recommendation.
Yep, Councillor Lockenberg has a question, but thank you,
Yeah.
Councillor Page.
Well, I'll second the recommendation.
Okay,
and
there we
then-
go. Now, Councillor Lockenberg, and
Yeah.
then Councillor Page, you moved it, so I'll come back to you in a minute.
Yeah, just simply to say that, you know, when I rented places in the past, there would be a microwave, for example, in the apartment, and it's similar size, dimension, and pretty common, I think.
And you didn't take the microwave when you left?
You didn't walk away from
Yeah, you didn't take the microwave?
Took the toaster.
How many
Pick a toaster,
microwaves do
okay.
you have?
Councillor Page, you moved the motion. Do you want to talk to it, or are you good?
No, I'm good. I'm comfortable with everything we're doing, as long as the only thing I would say is we do want to include the tenants. We want to work actively to include them, and we don't want to be too scared that, you know, one or two instances of potential loss will happen. It's so important for the program in the first place to understand how this is going to be used. So I'm fine with the phased approach, but yeah, we can, in my mind, we can move on.
If you can read the resolution number 1 then, please, Councillor Page.
Yeah, that the Waste Management and Wildlife Attractant Amendment Bylaw number 3566, 2023 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Councillor Payne.
So I just am trying to understand the timeline. So we received the food cyclers in December, and it sounds like we haven't dispersed any as of the moment. Is that correct? So we're getting this paperwork all in process so that we're ready to go forward with it. And I see that there will be a coordinated communications plan for participants. So is that right from, I did read the document, how to get one. So if you move into a resident that doesn't have one, is that subsequent to the pilot that you fill out the application to the engineer or something? Did I misread that? So do people need to do that now, or is this door to door? I'm just trying to get a better understanding of this.
So we still have our 2 groups. We have our early adopters list, which is still open for candidates to apply to be part of the program. And then we have people that we're requesting to be part of the program, and that's Fairview.
Sorry, in Fairview?
Yeah, that's the pilot neighborhood.
Yeah.
So until those spots are filled, then it's open for application.
So in Fairview, people are gonna fill out that application, so it's just gonna come geographically? They're gonna be asked, so sort of door to door, or a mail out campaign, or?
Well, we're still in the finalizing the program design. So
Okay.
those exact logistics and details haven't been finalized. Of course, we have had conversations on how, you know, that will best work. But we will be beginning that launch with the initial pilot participants, offering them to upgrade their machines. And then we would move to the early adopters. And then once that's done, then we would be opening it to the Fairview pilot area. And how we do so will be probably a number of ways.
We'll learn a lot the first few rollouts.
So the grant position that came in December 2020, how long is that? That's your position, is it? How long is that for? Is it a 3-year term, a rolling term?
That initial
Oh, that's
last year,
done.
But then the two applications that we were successful in also included my position also.
Okay, because it is one of the concerns that I have. There seems to be a significant amount of time, and I know we want to do it correctly, but the longer, the more staff hours that are put into actually getting it out to do the pilot program, it is a concern as we go forward, because we've already got the grants, we've already contributed a significant number of tax dollars, and $100 on our wastewater bill this year. That sounds like it's going to continue on in perpetuity, maybe. Yeah, I think we need to be mindful of that as we go forward.
So our anticipated first disbursement would probably be in the next month or two, and then continue on until we've got all of the 1,600 dispersed. There's a lot of logistics in the background that,
I hear that.
Are, yeah.
You're uncovering every stone.
Yeah, exactly. All the way from setting this type of thing up to the program guide, to educating, also to collections, right? So where are people going to put that, and then how is that going to actually make it out to Groman and out to Selmo? So there's a lot of pieces and moving parts, and yeah, we are very excited to launch as soon as we can. And this is a big piece, this part, and it took a while to run through the different options and scenarios as to what would be the very best way of preventing them from being misused and leaving the city. So once this piece is done, it's a pretty big step as we approach our finalization.
So just to keep everybody just on task, we are talking about just the bylaw here. I mean, and I know that the team will be back to give us more details about the rollout and how things go along. This bylaw is necessary at this point for them to do the next steps. So just, I'll take some more comments from people, but if we can remember that we're talking about adoption of this bylaw is what's on the table in front of us. Councillor Payne, you had a secondary.
I know this is a strange question, but yeah, so our household got recycling when we got that. We got the blue bin thing. So is there a way that I can damage my blue bin, that if I did damage it, if for some reason I backed over it with a car or something, do I then need to buy a new one from the city? Is that how that works? I'm trying to get something in my head
That's correct, exactly.
Perfect. I don't think I could run that thing over, but just in case.
Wow. Yeah.
I think we buy them for, sorry, I always just interrupt. May I speak? Through the chair. I think we buy those at a discounted rate, though, those blue bins. Like when I bought one, it's not like the cost you would pay at Canadian Tire. Okay.
But I would have to replace
have
it
to
if
pay
our
for it, yeah.
household destroyed it. And the fact that our household has 2 suites in it and we only took 1, does that mean if we move, you're gonna ask us for 2 back? Because we should have noted that down, that we only took 1, or?
Yes, we should have.
We should have, okay.
No.
We'll buy a
I'm
new
sure
one, it's
we'll-
okay. We'll contribute it to the city. We're building another place this year, so we don't want another one. We can get all our recycling in one, thanks.
Any further on the motion? Okay, seeing nothing. All those in favor of the motion? Okay, and opposed, and that carries. And motion number 2, if I can have a mover, Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. Could you read it, please?
That the Waste Management and Wildlife Attractant Bylaw Amendment, Bylaw number 35662023 be read a third time by title only.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Seeing none, all those in favor, opposed, and carries.
So can I just, as someone that's piloted the new one for the last 2 or 3 months, I can tell you it's 10 times better than the original ones. It's at no point has it has anything kind of gummed up in it, or it has way better capacity. It's night and day better than that original version. So people will be really excited, and one thing that certainly we find is, that convenience factor, that, you have this bin, anything that's organics, goes in that bin. When it's full, you process it, and it's as simple as that. And so I think people will be really excited to get these units, and especially those that have used the old ones, they'll just see a night and day difference with the new one.
Mayor, I just want to say, as an owner of the original one, which we've used now for 3 years, probably once every second day, it's still chugging along. We love it. So if the next one's even better, it's wonderful. But these units are, I mean, the original one has lasted perfectly well for 3 years, so.
Okay, thank you very much, Carmen
you.
and Emily, and I'm sure we'll see you back again, and now you have a bylaw to be able to use to direct your, almost, yes, we do have to come back for another reading, adoption. Okay, and moving on to item 12D, the step code and building amendment bylaw number 3570. Staff are presenting a report to council in response to recently published changes to the BC Building Code. Staff are proposing that the building bylaw be amended to require that Part 9 residential homes hit either Step 4 of the BC Energy Step Code or hit Step 3 of the BC Energy Step Code if they also achieve the EL-3 strong level of the zero carbon step code. This option-based approach is I'm not even gonna say that word because I can't say it, known as a step-back approach. Building Amendment Bylaw number 3570, 2023 is now presented for the first 3 readings. And we have Sebastian back, and we have Natalie, the other Natalie. Oh, it's so confusing. Back, who is our carbon emissions person. So I'm gonna hand it over. There's quite a bit to read here. There's quite a bit. We've had a lovely presentation earlier this year. I believe it was in December, January, came and really got a good understanding. Council was able to get a good understanding of about the embodied carbon, and yeah, so a little bit more information. So take it away, whichever one of you wants to lead off.
Sounds great. Thank you, Mayor Morrison. Yeah, so we're putting forward this change in response to the engagement that we did over the past couple of months. We engaged with you folks, and you told us to go back to the community and ask more specific questions about what is realistic, considering all these changes proposed by the province. We've also since gotten clarity from the province on what those changes are actually in detail. There have been some small details that have changed. This has not substantially impacted our recommendation. And so one key finding, and that is highlighted in the RFD, is, and the engagement complimentary brief, is that builders and folks in the community really liked having options. And we want to be ambitious and very intentional in how we move this thing forward and push to zero carbon buildings for new construction by 2030. That is outlined in Nelson Next. That is an ambition that I think we all want to stay strongly aligned with. And so what we are recommending is taking into consideration all that we've heard from the builder community and wanting to be ambitious and also sustainable, considering that there is more to come. Like I talked about last year, embodied carbon, we do not have regulatory power yet, but that might change, and we want to give ourselves a little space and negotiation while still continuing to build trust with our building community that we can do this together, and we can do this ambitiously. So, open for all questions.
Councillors, Councillor Woodward.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, congratulations.
Yay!
Well done on your award. Can you give us your actual title?
Yeah, Climate Resilience Planner.
Thank you. That's great. So I was wondering, as you're moving along, what, how's the building community, how are you interacting with the building community as you're moving along here? It feels like we're trying to kind of, yeah, like as you said, kind of go ahead of the situation so it's not a surprise when the province brings down these Step Code 4. Is that correct? So, sorry, is that a correct? That's the correct assumption.
So we'll just clarify through the chair that step 3
Right.
for part 9 buildings, so more simple, smaller dwellings, is gonna become required as of May 1st.
Right.
That will not impact Nelson because we are already at that level.
Right.
But we want to, as a community, as a council, staff, we want to be ahead of the curve. And so what we are recommending is a phased approach over years, but why we're here today is just the recommendation for the change in August. The May 1st change is just as of May 1st, municipalities across the province will have the ability to introduce the zero carbon step code, which previously was named the carbon pollution standard, and moving to a higher level of the BC energy step code, and that doesn't actually impact Nelson as of May 1st.
Okay, just a supplemental, Mayor?
Yes.
Thank you. So then as step code 4 will come, but your work now is getting our local builders ready before that happens so that we can smoothly move into that. Is that sort of the name of the game?
Correct.
Right, okay.
2027 is when step 4 will be required, so we will be ahead of.
Great. Thank you very much.
Councillor Lockenberg,
I'd like to move the first
Perfect.
resolution.
if you wouldn't mind reading it, and that's been seconded by Councillor Woodward, so.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson Building Amendment Bylaw number 3570, 2023 be introduced and read a first and second time by title only.
Further discussion, councillors? Seeing none, I'm gonna hazard we take a vote. All those in favor? Oh, look at that, unanimous. Okay. And so that's carried. And moving on to resolution number 2, moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. Councillor Woodward.
That the Corporation of the City of Nelson's Building Amendment Bylaw number 3570, 2023 be read a third time by title only.
Okay. Seeing as how we didn't have any good on the first one, let's try all those in favor. And that, again, thank you, Councillor Page, and that carries. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you very much to Development Services and the Climate and Energy team.
Mayor, I have to recuse myself for 13A.
Okay. We'll let you know, we're gonna get this done real fast, so we'll let you know right away. So, and we have joining us now, Amy Mooney, the Deputy, Corporate, CFO, Finance Officer. We're discussing the 2023 COVID Recovery Grant Program. We had some money left over. This is the last of our COVID grant money is now being dispersed. Per council direction, staff have been working to administer the 2023 COVID Recovery Grant Program. An application intake was held in February of 2023, and staff are now presenting a recommendation to council with regards to awards under the grant. So, take it away, Amy.
Thank you, Mayor. So as Mayor mentioned, we received 19 applications back in February for the second phase of the COVID recovery grant. Total requested amount was just over 400,000. So we did form a working group with staff from different departments to develop a systematic approach on how we hand out this grant money. First, we identified if organizations qualified in the outlined program guidelines, so whether or not they were not-for-profit or sponsored by one, or registered charity, and that they had a physical presence in Nelson, and a majority of their programming was in Nelson. Next, we looked at their pre-COVID revenues, as well as their 2022 revenues, to determine if they had continued impact from lost earned revenue in 2022. Through the grant applications, we determined if the organization has taken measures that allow them to become more sustainable going forward. And finally, we went through the requested amounts and determined whether or not they meet the criteria for eligible costs. We removed any ineligible costs outlined in the program guidelines. Some major ones that we saw a couple times were wages and honorariums. Unfortunately, this led us to $246,000, so just slightly over the amount allocated for the recovery grant. So next we looked at the total continued lost earned revenue in 2022 and came up with the recommended amounts for each organization to the amount equal to the lower of either their lost earned revenue in 2022 or $25,000, which brought us to $200,000. Any questions?
Grants by attrition. Wow, you guys staff did a lot of work there. Council, do you see anything that you have any questions about, or?
Can I just maybe ask Amy to explain, maybe on your on the spreadsheet there, you know, so the first three are an example, so they all three applied for 25 and the recommendation is 25, 17.5 and 15. It just explained how you got to those numbers.
Correct. So in the step 4, they have the requested amount, they have no ineligible costs, and their eligible cost requests were all 25,000. The recommended amounts are lower for some of them as we looked at their 2022 revenues and the loss from pre-COVID to 2022. So if their continued lost revenue was less than 25,000, we didn't award them 25,000.
For example, Glacier Gymnastics, then their lost revenue was 17,500. Okay. Whereas the capital was 25,000 or more.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, seeing as how there's no. Councillor Payne.
I'll move it,
Thank you, Councillor Page.
just to get on the floor. Yep.
Thank you. Would you like to, Councillor Page, before I entertain Councillor Payne's, could you just quickly, and seconder is by Councillor Tate, could you read the motion with the winners, the amounts, please? Do you have that in front of you?
I do. That council award COVID recovery grants to the local nonprofit organizations as follows. Capital Fee 5,000, Glacier Gymnastics 17,500, Kootenai Car Share 15,000, Kootenai Musical Theater Society 7,500, Nelson Community Food Center 20,000, Nelson Civic Theater Society 25,000, Nelson District Women's Center 19,000, Nelson District Rod and Gun Club 19,000, Nelson Museum 25,000, Nelson Overture Concert Society 10,000, Nelson Rowing Club 5,000, Selkirk Concert Society 12,000 for a total of $200,000.
Thank you. So that's been moved and seconded. Councillor Payne.
When I got this information, I did reach out to the cultural community, and there was just one organization on there that I wasn't familiar with, the Kootenai Musical Theater Society. So I was just interested because my understanding was that society was put together to do one production in 2019, so I'm just interested how they've lost income and how on the application was it explained what income they anticipated over the COVID years through some other activity that individuals I spoke to were unaware of, I guess is how I like to phrase that.
Yeah, there was quite a bit of detail in all of the applications, so I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I can see that they had ticket sales pre-COVID as well as in 2022.
As well as in 2022?
Correct.
Oh, okay. Nobody seemed to know about that one. Does anybody want to know? Okay, thank you. That was just a question that came up. I said I would check into it.
Good question. Any further questions? Okay, all those in favor of the resolution as presented? Okay, and opposed, and that carries. And if somebody could find Councillor Woodward and invite him back to the room, that would be great.
And we'll look into that. If we have misinformation, then we'll make sure
It's
that's
I
not the
believe
case.
it's a small group, so maybe they're just not connected with the rest of the cultural community in some way, but,
Yeah, but if you're hearing something different, we'll make sure we check in and
And
make
I-
sure
yeah, I
they're
s-
legitimate.
certainly don't wanna, cast aspersions on
Yep.
anyone, but I
But we'll
wanna
we'll
make
ask,
sure that
Why you
we're
ask the questions
distributing
is that-
funds to,
That can be investigated, and so
yeah,
we'll make sure that there isn't anything.
Yep.
Okay, moving on to 13B, sidewalk patios, and we get Matt. Oh, sorry, Matt. I went away on vacation for a couple weeks and, wasn't in City Hall, and I missed the hellos and the highs and the.
Just call him Natalie.
I don't know. I mean, Natalie's a good word, though. I mean, we have two Natalies. So, an update here on the Sidewalk Cafe expansion and bylaws. So, despite the receding impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, local businesses, particularly restaurateurs and other food and beverage establishments, have communicated to the city staff that supply chain, staffing, housing, and wage complications continue to challenge the economic vitality of Nelson's downtown. The past 3 seasons of sidewalk cafes and patio operations have been very successful in augmenting a vibrant downtown and aiding economic success of local businesses. The Chamber of Commerce has consulted with downtown businesses regarding patio operations and is in attendance if we need to hear from them to provide an overview of the results. Pursuant to Sidewalk Cafe Bylaw number 3441 for the 2023 patio season, staff shall continue to review patio expansions on a case-by-case basis. Looking forward, staff recommends that council direct staff to review the bylaw and present any proposed amendments in advance of the 2024 patio season. So, I see that Tom Thompson has joined the podium, and Matt, so I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, sure. Good evening, council. I might just start with a quick summary before I let you chat with Tom. So for any councilors who don't know, the city has a sidewalk cafe bylaw, which regulates the design, operation, permitting of patios within the city's downtown that are operated on typically on city right-of-way, so that's sidewalks, streets, and on-street parking spaces in some circumstances. So for the past 3 years, the city has waived the permit fees for issuing the permits for sidewalk cafes, and last year we enabled some temporary expansions which had to be paid for and had the relevant fees attached to them. And recently, through discussions with the Chamber of Commerce and local restaurateurs and other downtown businesses, it has been communicated to city staff that the lingering impacts of COVID-19 are still relevant and still impacting our local businesses in a variety of ways. So, historically, the operation of our sidewalk cafes and patios has been quite successful in aiding the economic vitality of those local businesses while also contributing to that vibrant downtown that everybody in the city wants. So currently what staff are considering after those discussions with the chamber and with those businesses is potentially operating a pilot project of sorts or just a temporary trial period for the 2023 season to use the existing bylaw and work within the confines of that bylaw to enable some temporary expansions of those patios, of which we have a handful of interested restaurateurs who would potentially like to expand the footprint of their patio. So the Chamber of Commerce has been doing some consultation with some local downtown businesses and with the local restaurateurs who are interested in expanding their patio, and has been getting some feedback on that, which has generally been supportive. Overall, the purpose of managing this bylaw and the operation of it is having a proper balance between public space and utilization of that public space by the private industry. So that's what we're here to discuss this evening. And should we move forward with that temporary pilot project for 2023, we would then be reviewing the success and the hurdles of the operation of those expanded patios, and then we would potentially bring any relevant bylaw amendments to council in 2024. And with that, I'll pass it over to Tom with any of his comments.
What a summary. I think that's all you need to hear. No, in reality, COVID continues to exist amongst us, and I think it's going to continue for a long time. Waiving of fees, we were certainly supportive of over the last couple of years, and I think the businesses that we consulted with and we talked to are certainly quite prepared to pay for stalls and get the revenue back into the city. The expansion of the patio process for, I would say, 4 to 5 individuals is important to them to be able to have that opportunity. That's one of the reasons why we came back and said, after we had heard originally that the letters had gone out saying that patio seating was going to happen and go back to the way it was in 2019, we just felt that we didn't really engage with businesses correctly. And I take some of that responsibility. So I said, look, let's have a discussion with Matt and Sebastian and see if we can get a better engagement with the business community. And we did a great job. I thought Darren Davidson went out and knocked on a lot of doors. There's a summary here of the number of people he spoke with. We had a great virtual meeting with 29 or 30, not just food and beverage operators, but retailers as well. So we wanted to make sure we were getting across it. Challenges, and there's a few challenges, obviously, with patios expansion. There's also a lot of positives. So we wanted to focus on the positives, but some of the negatives, people just not cleaning up around their own patio. Some of the off-street people that may not have the ability to have an expanded patio or a patio at all may say that they're not all that in favor of expanding it larger. That being said, there's so many positives about the vibrancy of the downtown core, businesses needing that space to be able to generate income, to be able to get more cost increases and more challenges that they've been having over the last 3 years. So we're very much in favor of trying to move this forward as a pilot for this year, and then working collaboratively with development services to try to come up with amendments and long-term solutions for the patio bylaw, so we don't have to come back and ask on an annual basis to say this is something that we should consider doing. And I would have brought Darren Davidson here, the guy that went out and did a lot of door knocking. Darren's actually told me he had to go to old man's yoga tonight. So he went to old man's yoga, and apparently I can go to super old man's yoga tomorrow. So that's why Darren's not here for any further discussion. But all of the summary notes from the meetings and the face-to-face conversations were attached to the development services.
Before I take questions, because I know you're all going to have questions, a couple things. I want to remind you that we heard from Development Services early in our elected term in regards to review of the patio bylaw, and that we were going to be looking at putting the fees back in and sort of reverting back to that 2019 proposal. This is not asking us about whether a pilot should go or not go. The Director of Planning at his discretion always has the ability to make some changes. So what we're asking for here tonight is that we ask them to review the policy and bring us recommendations before the 2024 season starts. And I would imagine as part of those, we will get to see what the effect of what the decisions that the planning director is putting in place for this summer. We will have the feedback on that to make decisions in 2024. We are not debating whether or not there's a pilot. We're not debating a change to the bylaw. Currently, the director has discretion. I just want to make that really clear, because we could be going down a deep rabbit hole here. So I just want to make it clear that when one of you reads this, you'll see it. So if I could have a mover of the recommendation, and then we'll have discussion. Moved by Councillor Woodward, seconded by Councillor Lockenberg. If you would read, you can speak first. Councillor Lockenberg, you're second.
The council directs staff to review the Sidewalk Cafe bylaw number 3442, 2019, and report back to council in early 2024 with the proposed amendments.
Thank you. And that's been moved and seconded. Would you like to speak to it? Councillor Lockenberg then.
I have a question and a comment. The first is, am I understanding that 2023, we're going back to the 2019? There's no, Sebastian will not be considering our sort of response to this to help guide your decision around the patios? So that's the question for the comment.
Yes, so essentially there was an amendment passed in 2020 that permitted the discretion of the director to reflect on potential expansions for patios, and that is what the current existing issue of the bylaw allows, and that's what would be used for this season.
Right, but at his discretion, if this council votes to, send it back, and the discussion might include, and my comment will, that I think I hear what the business community is saying strongly, and I agree strongly that patios over parking is my opinion and feeling on this. And I would suggest that there's a couple of things to consider separate and apart from the lost parking, which is when this came before us in 2020, there was a discussion around, outdoor heating and the gas heating infrastructure, and it was suggested to you at the time that, given that this is COVID, given that there's a lot of pressure on businesses at that time, that we would sort of, look past it, but did not want to see, all these patios being heated by propane. That was going against a lot of what we were trying to do. So I want to put that back on the radar and really stress that this is not a viable long-term solution to be heating. I love the expanded patios. I think we should do it and encourage it, but there's alternatives other than gas heating.
Any further comments or questions or concerns? Councillor Payne.
I just have a quick question. What is patio season? Are there dates bookending it?
Yes, May 1st through the end of October.
Okay. And I'm interested in the term wage complications. What does that mean?
What was the
It's in, at the beginning of the,
it's in the analysis summary.
COVID is still with us, staffing, housing, and wage complications.
income, say more income complications, so not necessarily wages? That wasn't something that I wrote,
Okay,
but that's how I
okay, that's
interpreted
why I was just trying to get it straight in my head.
Yeah,
And just the last comment is I love the patios. I was very excited when I read one of the comments, concern for loss of parking was largely disregarded by local businesses. I will hold on to that one and we will take it forward. Now I sort of have a question. Have I gone on too long? Do I need to ask for an extension?
Oh, keep going.
Okay. I think in addition to the propane, one of the things that we have discussed is about lengthening the parking timeframes and also the number of days that we collect parking for.
Okay, so
Is
I am gonna
that's
stop
a
you.
different thing? Okay, thank you.
We're not talking about parking.
Okay.
Okay, we are talking about asking for them to do this pilot and come back with recommendations about changes to the sidewalk cafe bylaw, which may or may not impact parking.
Okay.
They're not tied together, because not every cafe is in a parking spot. So
Okay.
let's not talk about parking.
I won't talk about parking then.
Yeah.
We'll talk about it another time.
Yes.
And the balance of community amenity spaces is critically important because not everyone in our community can afford to go to a cafe and pay to sit outside and enjoy the beautiful ambiance that is created by the patios. So.
That's fair. That one you can talk about.
3 out of 4, not bad.
Okay. Any councillors have any other concerns or anything? We're keeping Councillor Page entertained, so that's good. I see his smiling face up there.
I have one comment.
Yes.
I would just like to speak to the work that the chamber does because they distill so much information for us, and just thank you. Thank you.
Yes, and we did recognize the chamber earlier this evening in terms of
constantly.
volunteer week next week, and the fact that the chamber is basically, except for you, Tom, you're the only paid employee that runs on volunteer energy and does a fine job.
I'm down to your volunteer.
I feel the same, Tom.
Anyhow, so thank you for that. Thank you, Tom. Tell him that you're owed a geriatric beer for him missing, and then you having to stay till 9 o'clock to be able to present your.
Geriatric yoga tomorrow night.
Yeah.
See you there.
Okay, moving on. We have the next item of business, number 3.
We didn't vote.
Oh, we didn't vote. Oh, okay. All those in favor? And opposed, and that's carried. Okay, moving on to 13C, Emergency Operations Center Equipment and Training Grant. The city's emergency management staff intends to apply for a grant under the Union of BC Municipalities, UBCM, Emergency Operations Center Equipment and Training Grant 2023 Emergency Preparedness Fund. The grant application will seek $30,000 and will be used to further develop the city's Emergency Operations Center, the EOC, by funding equipment and training. No contribution is requested from the city aside from $5,000 of in-kind support. A council resolution supporting the grant application is now requested.
Move.
Moved by Councillor Woodward. Is there a seconder?
Second.
Seconded by Councillor Tate. Councillor Woodward.
Whereas council supports enhancement of the city's emergency operations center, therefore it be resolved that the corporation of the city of Nelson be authorized to apply for a $30,000 in grant funding under the UBCM Emergency Operations Center and Equipment and Training 2023 Community Emergency Preparedness Fund, and further the city of Nelson staff be responsible for overall grant management.
It's been moved and it's been seconded. Any discussion? Councillor Payne.
I just need a point of clarification. How can there be no financial contribution if we need to contribute $5,000 in kind?
That's the.
No, am I reading it wrong?
So it's existing.
In kind. Sorry, that's what
Staff
I.
time.
So
It's
that is a
existing staff.
financial contribution then? It's not.
But it's our current staff, not additional staff.
Okay.
So
So it's something they would already be doing.
Yeah.
But we need to say that we're doing that so that we can get the 30,000. Is that how
Well,
that works?
they would be doing these projects instead of something else, right?
in kind.
So it is their
It's,
core
yeah,
work, yes.
yeah, cost and budget impact to me, as there are no funds requested from the city, but it's already being taken out of
Already
what they
budgeted.
would. Oh, okay, that's what I want to understand, thank you. Thank you, yeah.
You're welcome.
Further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor and opposed, and that carries. Okay, moving on to information items according correspondence and minutes of committees and commissions. So item number 1, we have reports. So information items from finance, accounts payable.
Move receipt.
Okay, moved receipt, seconded by Councillor Logberg. Any discussion on the accounts payable listing? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries. Item number 2, development services. Looking for move receipt. Move receipt, Logberg. Seconded by Woodward. Thank you. Any questions or concerns about the building permanent statistics? Okay, great. So all those in favor? And carried. Thank you. Moving on to minutes, we can do this as a bundle unless anybody wants to pull something out. So we have the Nelson Housing Committee, the Cultural Development Committee, and the Nelson Public Library Board minutes. Can they be moved in totality? Moved by Councillor Lockenberg, seconded by Councillor Payne. Any discussion, questions? All those in favor? And that carries. And going on to updated correspondence, we have 4 pieces of correspondence here. Can they be moved as a package or somebody?
Move receipt.
Okay, move receipt, seconded by Councillor Payne. Okay, any discussion?
Just a quick question that I could have emailed before, but it was a quick turnaround. How much money do we give to the Kootenai Lake Hospital Foundation? Should I email that after? That's what this is about, right?
We
They're
don't.
thanking us for.
We don't.
Oh.
We don't.
So
They
what
sometimes
are they
apply
thanking
for
us
a SIP grant or the ReDi grant.
Okay,
ReDi
so
grant,
dear
yeah.
friends at the City of Nelson, so that's a SIP grant. Perfect. That's what I didn't understand from this letter. It sounded like we made a donation. I was just interested.
No, we don't
And that'll be, I can go back and look at.
donate per se, and then, and again,
Which I understand that.
that'll get into the matrix, and sometimes they get what they ask for, sometimes they don't get anything.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so the recommendation is to receive attached correspondence for information. All those then in favor, moved and seconded, and carried. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to item number 15, there is a notice of motion that's been put forward by Councillor Payne. Councillor Payne, if you would read it, please. Thank you.
Whereas it has been recognized at all levels of government that the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions is a critical priority for maintaining the health and well-being for all beings, and whereas transportation has been identified as one of the most significant contributors to greenhouse gas emissions in our area, and whereas the province of British Columbia in their Claim BC plan has recommended that communities implement an anti-idling bylaw to reduce emissions, and whereas Nelson Next, a new vision for addressing climate change, has identified the implementation and enforcement of an anti-idling bylaw in the City of Nelson as a priority tactic in aspiration number 1. And whereas this aspiration in Nelson Next also identifies the public health benefits of reducing idling, especially near schools, seniors' housing, and medical facilities. Therefore, be it resolved, the Council directs staff to bring forward an anti-idling bylaw to Council at the earliest possible timeframe, understanding the urgency of our shared responsibility for reducing greenhouse gas emissions.
Okay, so I'm just gonna take the moment because notice of motion, we haven't had yet in our term. So just in terms of the procedure of this, a notice of motion has been brought forward. The concept with the notice of motion is that we vote as a council whether or not we want to action this item at some point. So if we don't feel that this is an urgent item or whatever whatever the item might be, if there is an urgency around it or that it needs to be dealt with, because the policy goes on then to state, now we could change where we refer this to, is that if you vote that yes, we accept this notice of motion, by our policy, our procedural bylaw, it is to be at the next business meeting, which would mean that staff would have to take time to be able to do the work to bring something forward for the next meeting for us to discuss and then make a decision about what this motion asks. I'm getting strange looks. So all we're doing here is, it's a notice of motion. The question is, do we put it on the docket for next month? Or do we decide that there's other, just keeping in mind that staff capacity, this takes staff capacity to do this. Is this on the list of things that we're asking staff to do and the work plan that's already there? Are we moving some of their work aside so that this work can get done to bring back contemplation of a bylaw about idling? We have a number of things within the Nelson Next plan that we're trying to get off the ground and get going. I just need you to do that. Now we could say, I realize here it says earliest possible time frame, but is that 6 months later? I mean, it's like, this is a notice of motion. We're either moving this or we're not moving it. That's what the question is before us now, based on the procedural bylaw. Do I have everybody totally confused now?
I got it.
Okay.
Can I just add, as I said earlier, and staff is doing consultation with, and I think the final one this week is with staff, or the climate team is doing consultation with staff, and after they complete that work, they're going to bring that proposed implementation plan back for, to council for, in advance of the strategic priorities, so you know where that looks like, and I would just suggest you kind of line this up with that. Don't recall it specifically on the list, but I don't know if it's part of something. Anyway, I'll let the climate team know, but I would say that's a good alignment, to hear where their plans are prior to sort of putting something in on it.
Councillor Woodward.
I feel like I totally understand where you're coming from, Councillor Payne. I just feel like we have a 6-person team working exclusively on implementing the Nelson Next plan. This is part of it. And I kind of feel like instead of trying to sort of shove this to the front and have staff scrambling to do something, why don't we just let our climate and energy team work through the process, work through the document which was created to guide them, and this is part of it, and this will come, but I feel like there's so many pots boiling on the stove right now, but we do have a 6-person team doing this kind of work, so I would just say I have confidence in that team that this kind of work will eventually make it here and will be implemented. I don't feel like I want to just all of a sudden throw this out there and have staff scrambling. It just doesn't feel like a smart move. They have long work plans, and this is an important piece, but I wouldn't call it like a critical right now piece. So that's just my 2 cents.
Councillor Ockerman.
I have a point of order. I don't think we debate notices of motion. Is that correct?
The notice of motion is we either kind of vote yes or we vote no. Yeah, so we either defeat it or I'm just being, you know what, it's always a new bit of learning process, but you're correct. Councillor Page.
You over there.
I'm pointing at you. Can you
I wanted, yeah, take us in a slightly different direction, just having refreshed my reading of the notice of motion section. It's unfortunate that our setup of 4.42 is in this fashion, that we get the notice of motion, that we then at the meeting vote on the notice of motion and whether to incorporate. I think there's some good comments being handed around, but it makes me look at this section of the procedural bylaw and what is lost from being able to put forward a notice of motion and then let council go away until the next meeting before they're actually going to have a discussion about the merits of the motion. It's creating a sense of urgency that ideally we want to try to avoid. And I think we'll probably want to come back to this section and maybe adjust this wording a little bit to create more of a cadence between meetings on give people time to think about these things and consider them, and not have that sense of urgency around just the very fact that a notice of motion has been brought up. So I did want to really highlight that piece. Otherwise, some wording adjustments could certainly be made to make this within a yearly time frame as opposed to the ultimate of urgencies. But
yeah, thank you.
That's all.
Councillor Page, and I agree, and I had this discussion earlier today with corporate officer in terms of the fact that because it reads that then it needs to come back right away, that it is a bit cumbersome, and probably the procedural bylaw is one of those bylaws that we probably need to contemplate looking at again to sort of catch these sort of crazy procedural loopholes that, well, I don't know about the rest of you, but they kind of drive me a little bit crazy. So thank you for that, Councillor Page. Anybody else have any comments?
Do I get to comment? That's my whole comment there.
That's your comment. So, well, we need to either move it or.
There's 2 ways to go about it.
Okay.
We could not have a seconder or have a seconder. And if it isn't seconded, it just doesn't.
Dies.
It dies.
We'll all second it.
Okay, so now we have to vote. Okay, so if you vote yes, this is gonna go through the process, the way it is, and if you vote no, it stays right here.
I'll just ask one question. Can we, I know that's in our procedure bylaw, but council does have the right to say we're going to overrule that. So maybe that's part of it, because I see this as
It's gonna be done.
earliest convenience. So all we're trying to do is not have to kind of do some work before the report's coming through, before you go to strategic priorities. So if that's part of it, that we delay it till after the strategic priorities, that might be a good way to manage this. Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that this is going to get done. I know that there's been conversation, and I don't know that I've had the conversation with you, Councillor Payne, but I've had this with a number of our climate activists within the community. Some really wanted to see this come forward. Others had brought this forward in the past and have said, no, we have some other priorities because we see that this isn't a top priority. So now from those groups, that some that were very much in favor of this have now moved aside to say, no, we think there's other things that need, and one of them being the embodied carbon and the step,
Zero carbon step code.
yeah, were far more important to them than the idling bylaws. So they've kind of moved where they see the pressure points to be. I mean, this is gonna get done as part of the Nelson Next implementation, but there is that problem at this point that if we do what's in the bylaw, then we are putting it at the top of the pile, instead of letting it sort of flow out.
So can we overrule the, what's this bylaw called again? This bylaw, procedure bylaw, and like refer to strategic planning? Or we don't need to do it because we all know we're referring it to strategic planning? I'm just trying to understand.
Okay, I'm gonna ask a question. So would it be, should we defeat this and then have a motion to say that much cleaner, instead of trying to fix this, right? So that we can defeat this, and then somebody can make a motion to require that we discuss the anti-idling bylaw as part of strategic planning.
We don't have to, sorry.
No,
Yeah, we don't have to make a resolution to
Okay.
discuss things at strategic planning, do
Okay.
we? It's on my list.
Okay, it's on your list? Okay.
Long ago. I've been
So
waiting.
then I would say at this point, it's just a vote. I mean, we know that this is in, I mean, it's in the priority tactics, I mean, for Nelson Next. So we can just vote against it, and then it's gone, and it'll come up. Okay? All those in favor of the notice of motion? All those opposed to the notice of motion? Okay, and opposition carries, so it dies. So no notice of motion. Whew. Okay.
I'm sorry to complicate it. My vote was in favor, but there certainly was a delay. I could see it on the screen.
Oh, thank you. I think you still would have been
So you have to-
more than 3 or 4. But
Yeah, you'll have to bring it up. Just
thank you, Councillor Page. Yes, it was a bit of a delay. Okay, moving on to, the other nice
We
challenging
just
thing
have
to
a
have is
stretch break,
late
man,
items.
after- do we, there's late items? Oh, I thought we were
There's
going
none.
to the
It's
in-camera.
Yep, late items. There are no late items. So item number 17, resolution to close the meeting to the public. Resolution is required.
So moved.
Thank you. That is an opinion of the council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of council and staff and any approved audiences be excluded from this meeting, and that the special closed meeting of council continue under section 91C and D of the community charter to deal with matters relating to the following: